Hey, what's up? It's Cute What If this side. Today we will be seeing, what if Deku and Yui were in love? Now before we move ahead with the fic, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future what ifs like this. When Izuku looked up, he saw there was a planet trailing behind the moon. Bright, he thought, puzzled. I guess it's not red looking enough to be Mars, and too high in the sky for Venus. It must be Jupiter, then. The moon was pretty close to half full, facing downward to the horizon where the sun had disappeared several hours prior. Though it was only 9, it felt much later. Winter had a way of making one feel that way when the sun set so early. The reason Izuku knew how to distinguish the planets at all was because of Uraraka. Uraraka liked space. She had often talked about it in his presence, though maybe gushed was a better term for how it went. I should pay better attention when she's talking, especially in regards to things she's passionate about. Midoriya, said Todoroki, blinking at him. Stop standing still. Izuku looked back down to ground level. Todoroki and Ida were both looking back at him from the steps of the dorm building, about to head inside. Warm yellow light was streaming out of the windows, promising and welcoming. The three of them had just returned from some very late training. Apparently, Class B was here tonight, and Sato had made dinner for all 40 of them, since it was the last Friday before winter break. What are you thinking about, Midoriya? Ida asked him. Izuku smiled. How will be third years soon? Todoroki blinked again. Time does fly. When I think about how many things we've been through together, it seems like it should all have felt much longer than it has. As much as I would love to reminisce, said Ida, adjusting his glasses, they are likely waiting for us within. It would be rude to linger and make Sato wait even longer before putting the food in the refrigerator. Ida had a point as always. They went inside, and Izuku was greeted by a wave of noise. It being 9 already, most everyone had finished eating, and were now scattered around the common room. It seemed the largest group of people, both Class A and B, were sitting cross-legged in a circle to the left, playing some party game. Ashido and Takage were leading it, predictably. Another smaller group was at the TV to the right, playing a video game. Or rather, Kirishima and Tetsutetsu were playing it against each other while the others watched. Then there were other pockets of socialization happening around the room. Yaoyorozu lifted her head. She had been talking to Gyro and Kendo next to the kitchen counter. There they are. Sorry we're so late, said Izuku, scratching his neck sheepishly. We got carried away. Don't worry about it. Momo's eyes passed over Todoroki, and she blushed for a moment before carrying on. Sato left you 3 some stuff out on the counter. You must be starving. They walked over and picked up their food. Gyro noticed them. The late training trio has made their grand appearance. Now we've got all 41. That extra one was Shinso, who had joined class at the start of this year. He was currently watching the video game on the TV. Kendo shook her head sadly. No, we don't. Kodai wandered off somewhere. You know how she is. Kodai. Izuku furrowed his brow before remembering who that was. Yui Kodai. She had been on the opposing team in his match during that first joint training between the two classes, a million years ago. A quiet girl. She must not like big crowds. He could relate to that. He didn't much like them either, though he was better than he used to be. It was his last big hurdle to jump if he wanted to become the #1 hero. He was nearly as strong as All Might, and had taken part in many now famous incidents, elevating him and some of his classmates to celebrity status. But he still just wasn't as strong of a public figure as his predecessor. His anxiety continually got the better of him when he had to do interviews, even if they were just practice. And he still wasn't great at talking to girls. Ida and Todoroki were both sitting at the counter to eat, while partaking in Yaoyorozu and Kendo's conversation. The former, because he had a class rep position like the other two, and the latter, because he had a crush on Yaoyorozu. Izuku only knew that because Todoroki had randomly trusted him with the information one time. He would have never figured it out otherwise. When it came to figuring out people's feelings about one another, he was pretty hopeless, and knew it. Todoroki patted the empty seat next to him, seeing Izuku still standing there with his food. Izuku shook his head, smiled, and said, I think I'm going to go see what Ashido and them are doing. Todoroki shrugged with his mouth full, as if to say suit yourself, and turned back to look at Yaoyorozu. If he likes her, why doesn't he just say something? He's not like me. She'd actually say yes if he asked. Maybe. I dunno. These thoughts in mind, Izuku plopped himself down in one of the seats near the big circle to eat. Ashido noticed him. Midori, she exclaimed. Would you like to join us? Go on, Komori-chan, scoot over and make room for him. That's all right. Izuku lifted a hand. I'll just watch for a bit while I'm eating. Might join when I'm finished. Mina pursed her lips. All right, fine. That way you can know how it's played without us having to explain it to you, I guess. Anyway, next person. The game appeared to entail some kind of box of cards which was being passed around the circle. Each card had something written on it. The next person to receive it was Kaminari, who pulled out a card and said, has kissed someone of their own gender for the hell of it. The class A half of the circle all said Ashido at the same time that the class B half all said Takage. Mina and Setsuna looked at each other, smirking. Rock, paper, scissors for it. The lizard girl suggested. You're on. Ashido won, and swiped the card from Kaminari with a proud expression. He raised his eyebrows, baffled. Wait, did you actually want the card? I thought the winner was whoever had the least. Maybe I did, said Mina. Why? Wanna see me kiss a girl, Kaminari? Ooh, several of the girls let out at once. Takage whistled. Izuku felt a pang of panic spike through his system, despite not even being involved in the conversation. His cheeks flushed. Kaminari sputtered. Moving on. He slid the box over to the person next to him, which happened to be Tsuyu. She read a card. Has a secret coin collection. Ribbit. Him. Ashido scanned the faces in the circle. It's Shoji. I've declared it. I collect nothing, Shoji protested. I am a minimalist. Nonetheless, does anyone else oppose? No one spoke up, and so Tsuyu handed the card to Shoji, who sighed and accepted it good-naturedly. I get it, thought Izuku. It's a who is most likely to type thing. Each card has a scenario on it. All the players vote on which player is most likely to end up in that scenario. Accumulating cards means you're more of a quirky character, I guess. So the most boring or most mysterious person would likely be the winner. Izuku sighed. He could probably win this game really easily. He plopped down next to Komori and crossed his legs. Mina perked up. Ready to join us now, Midori. It's so fun, just wait. Next the box went to Zero, who read out, is the type to come into a conversation super late and ask, what's going on? Probably Pony, said Takage. Next to Izuku, Komori hummed in agreement. Pony said something angrily in English, but took the card anyway. Next, the box went to Takage herself, who slipped a card out, flipped it in her fingers, and grinned while reading. Works out just for the flex. Midori on the money. Hey, Izuku complained. He hadn't expected to get singled out so quickly. It is not just for the flex ... It's more of a habit than anything. Still, said Kaminari, it does fit you best. Do you deny that you're a beefcake? Setsuna asked him in a faux serious voice. His blush deepened. I don't have to answer that. No, but you do have to take this card. She threw it at him, and he snatched it out of the air, frowning at her. Setsuna passed the box over to Mina, but her eyes remained on Izuku. You don't stutter anymore. You used to stutter, right? Maybe I should look for someone else in your class that's easy to tease. She winked at him. He had to break eye contact. Good luck finding them, he murmured. Ashido picked out a card, and her golden eyes twinkled in a way that Izuku instantly disliked. This one is going to be embarrassing, I just know it. It's a double gain for Midori, she snorted, and then read, has taken way too long to confess to someone. Everyone else in the circle laughed, and Izuku's face immediately got even redder. Hey, what? Why is that mine too? Come on, don't play dumb. Mina stuck her tongue out at him. It's almost our third year, and you and Uraraka are still dancing around each other like you're hot coals. We don't dance around each other. Izuku's eyes flashed over to the TV, where Uraraka was watching the video game. She was not within earshot of this conversation, thank God. Midoriya, bro, said Zero, crossing his arms. Even us guys have figured it out, and we're supposed to be the stupid ones. When are you gonna start going out already? Me. With Uraraka. Izuku blinked. But, I don't. Oh my God, said Setsuna in surprise. He actually is that dumb. That upset him. He didn't like how everyone was laughing at him, like they were privy on some joke and leaving him out of it intentionally. He stood up abruptly, his face red. I changed my mind. I don't think I'm going to play after all. He turned and started walking toward the stairs. Hey, Midoriya, wait, I was just joking. Zero called in panic. Now you went and did it, Ribbit, Tsuyu scolded Mina and Setsuna. We didn't. He passed Todoroki and Ida and Yaoyorozu on the way up, and they looked at him with concern. He just broke past them, annoyed. The instant I tried to stick my nose out there and do something fun and social. He had felt so uncomfortable in that circle, like a bunch of insects were crawling all over him. He hadn't felt like that since Kakin and the other middle schoolers had all harassed him about being quirkless. It was not a good feeling to be reminded of. Izuku slowed his breathing as he climbed up the stairs, leaving the noise of the party behind. It didn't seem like anyone was coming after him. That was fine, though it also stung a little. Even when he really did want to get away from everyone. They're just gonna go right back to doing what they were doing before. They don't care about me that much. He wasn't necessarily upset about that fact, though. They were not obligated to be worried about his well-being. Slowly, the horrible prickly feeling on his body faded away, and he at least physiologically returned to calm, though his brain was still tumbling over and over. His heart rate slowed. Now, the regret was starting to creep in. I shouldn't have stormed off like that. I should have just just sat there and taken it. I should have just pretended I understood what they were talking about, and laughed with it. I had the worst possible response. Arg, I'll never have a good interview at this rate. What if a similar situation happened in public? As a hero, he couldn't just run off. Though All Might had certainly run off from situations before. For All Might, though, it had just added to that bewitching enigma factor. With himself, Izuku could only imagine it as being awkward, just like everything else about him. For some reason, he kept walking when he reached his room. He knew at the end of this hall, there were more stairs. Stairs that led further up. At the top of these stairs was a trapdoor that led to the roof. Izuku peered up at it, and blinked. The trapdoor was slightly open. He had never seen it open. There was something shining on the top step. He picked it up and scanned it. It was a padlock, but it was tiny. This was attached to the trapdoor, but it was ... it was shrunken. Shrunken right off the door. He stepped up onto the roof. The evening was clear, breezy, and cold. The dark woods that bound UAS campus on the south and east were moving and rustling in waves, while Musutafu twinkled down the hill to the right. Sitting on the edge of the roof was a person silhouetted by moonlight. Their head was tilted up to the sky, and their arms were wrapped around their chest. They had medium-length silky dark hair. It's Kodai, Izuku thought, disquieted. She must have heard him, because she tilted her head even further, leaning back so she was now looking at him upside down. Her eyes immediately jumped out to him. They were a fierce, piercing blue. When they made eye contact, he instantly felt as if she knew everything about him. That disquieted him even more. You, she said, not in an accusing manner or anything. He held up the shrunken padlock. Did you do this? She just kept staring at him upside down, and Izuku randomly felt like a goof. Of course she had done it. The answer was self-evident, and therefore she did not feel the need to say it. She never says anything if it's not necessary to say. What are you doing up here? She asked. I'm not sure, he answered honestly. You were not sent by Setsuna or Itsuka. He shook his head. Why would they send me of all people? Yui seemed to consider that for a moment. I don't know. Well, I promise they didn't. My feet just kind of took me here. Her blue eyes widened, and the corners of her full lips might have turned up a bit. In the shifting moonlight, it was hard to tell. That's interesting, she said. My feet did the same thing. Even though the comment was sort of funny in context, Izuku sensed no coyness or intention behind her words. She was just stating the truth. Then, he noticed, she was shivering a little. Of course she was, it was cold out here, and she was hugging herself about the chest. All she was wearing was her school uniform. Izuku, on the other hand, was wearing a sweatshirt. It read sweatshirt on the front. Are you planning on staying up here for a while? He asked her. She turned away from him, to look back at the moon. There is no plan. But, probably, I will be up here. Yes, well, you should be warmer, then. He walked over to her position, taking off his sweatshirt and holding it out to her. She looked at it blankly and then gave him a sort of dubious glance. You don't have to if you don't want to, of course. He added quickly, his heart picking up speed a little. But I would suggest it. Don't worry, I only put it on after finishing training a little while ago. It's basically as clean as it would be fresh out of the dryer. Her slender, pale hand slowly reached out and took the sweatshirt from him. I am not going to wear it, she muttered, and he honestly wasn't sure if she was even talking to him. She did, however, place the crumbled-up sweatshirt in her lap and lean over it slightly, hugging it as if to spread its warmth through her body. Izuku sat down next to her, hanging his legs off the side of the roof. She raised her eyebrows, her mouth opening a little. Are you staying? Well, yeah. I'm gonna need that back when you're done with it. He pointed at the sweatshirt. Yui paled. She seemed put out by this statement. Also, you're breaking the rules by being up here. And you broke a padlock. That's sabotage of school property. Someone really ought to keep an eye on you. Is that supposed to be a joke? Izuku hung his head. Yeah, I guess. That girl from your class with the big boobs can just make a new padlock. Izuku blushed. Her name's Yaoyorozu. They went silent for a while after that. Kodai had been watching the sky, so Izuku did the same thing. He looked up at the moon, and that planet that was trailing behind it. The stars were starting to come out in force, as well. After what felt like an eternity, he sensed her eyes upon him again. You, Kodai coughed. You wouldn't actually report me for breaking rules, would you? What? No. And no, not something like this. I'm not that K kind of person. His old stutter had returned a bit. Great. Hopeless. She nodded her head, as if accepting this, and looked back up at the sky again. Do you like the stars? Izuku ventured. Not really. Oh, he shut his mouth. He was already bad at talking to girls, and this one was just ... very difficult to read. She seemed confused by him, as well, and yet, the two of them continued to sit there in silence, watching the celestial bodies move across the sky. Minutes passed. Perhaps hours. Centuries. Izuku felt his own chest rise and fall. He was getting a little cold, but that was fine as long as Kodai was warm. He could even hear her soft breathing, barely audible over the rustling of the trees beneath them. Why are you still here? Yui asked, finally. I don't know, he thought. Because I feel like it, he said. She gasped. It was a small gasp, soft, but there nonetheless. For some reason, that put Izuku at ease, and he smiled. He pointed at the planet behind the moon. Did you know that's Jupiter? No, I didn't know that. Is it really? At least, I think so. I might be wrong. That was the last thing either of them said to each other. Another lifetime later, Yui stood up, dropped the sweatshirt into Izuku's lap, and walked back toward the trapdoor. Izuku did not see her again that evening, except in his mind. Long after the party had died down to nothing, long after he'd returned to his dorm room, long after he'd climbed into bed to get some rest, Yui Kodai filled his head. Hurry up, Yui. We're gonna be late. Yui was walking down the front path of her house to meet her best friend, Seiya, who always waited at the gate for her so they could walk together to school. They were 12 years old. Seiya had red twintails and was tapping her foot aggressively, hands on her hips. Did you hear me or what? I heard. Yui answered, frantically, and then she gasped, her eyebrows shooting up. Seiya, you're just wearing your uniform. Boo, yay. It's freezing out. I mean, for goodness sake, she cut herself off and gestured to the dirty leftover snowbanks on the side of the road. Why aren't you wearing a jacket? You'll freeze to death, or at the very least get sick. Does it matter? Seiya asked, annoyed. She flipped one of her twin tails over her shoulder. Here, let me go back and get one of my jackets for you, at least. Yui turned to run back into her house really quickly, but Seiya grabbed her by the wrist. Come on, there's not enough time. But, it'll just take a second. Yui protested. I'll be fine. It's not far. Stop worrying so much, Yui. But, come on. Finally, the two of them began walking to school, though Yui couldn't help but shoot concerned glances Seiya's way. Was she shivering? Were her teeth chattering? If she were to get sick, Yui would feel so bad. Did you pack your lunch today? She asked. Yes. Seiya shook her backpack, and some rustling could be heard. It's in there. Yui leaned over and unzipped the backpack. Hey, what are you doing? I'm just making sure. Hey, what? Seiya pushed her hand away. You calling me a liar or something? No, it's just, don't touch my backpack. My lunch is in there. Well, alright. Yui was worried about Seiya. She seemed self-destructive, recently. Not wearing a jacket. Not bothering to get enough to eat. She was gonna kill herself at this rate. It worried Yui a lot. Plus, Seiya had never had an issue with Yui touching her stuff before. They always used to share everything. Listen, Yui, I'm gonna split off from you when we reach the corner, K. Huh, why? Because I need to use the back gate of the school. We're cutting it too close on time. My homeroom is on that side of the building. Right. Wait, was it? Yui racked her brain. She had memorized Seiya's schedule, of course. Just like Seiya had memorized hers. Yes, Seiya's homeroom was in room 142, near the back wing of the building. So she was telling the truth. They reached the corner a few minutes later. Goodbye, Seiya said. Bye. Be careful. I'll see you in second period. Be sure to keep yourself warm, and... Yeah, Seiya waved her off, and was already crossing the street toward the back gate. Yui lowered her hand. For a moment, something had flashed across her friend's face. She hadn't understood it then, but later she would come to know it as disgust. Because just a few minutes later, their friendship fell apart permanently. Kodai. Earth to Kodai. Yui blinked. Yosuawase was waving his hand in front of her face. She shook her head a little, and made eye contact with him, staring blankly. Break time started, he said. All around them, Class B was rising in volume. People were moving from their desks to talk to friends. Others were getting snacks out. Vlad King had just stepped out of the classroom. Spacing out again, huh? He smirked. She shrugged. Awase wilted. One day I'll get you to say a word to me. Maybe. She'd ended up saying a lot of sentences to Izuku Midoriya last night. At least 8 or 9. More than she'd meant to. As Awase moved on, Itsuka and Setsuna both leaned over to look at her. Yui looked back and forth between them. Were they her best friends? Maybe, along with Ryuko. But I could always lose them just as fast. Even after a year of knowing Class B's feisty lizard girl and their capable, skilled president, she was still paranoid, cautious. It could take a year to build a friendship, but it only took a second to break it. She'd learned that the hard way. What is it? Yui asked quietly, careful to not garner the attention of the boys chatting in the circle nearby. It wasn't like she didn't want them to hear her voice at all. It's just that they always made a big deal about it when she talked. Yui didn't really like being the center of attention. Luckily, Itsuka and Setsuna understood this the way the boys did not. Itsuka smiled easily and asked, "Where did you go last night while we were hanging out with Class A?" "On the roof," she answered honestly. Setsuna laughed, while Itsuka seemed appalled. "Yui, you know that's not allowed, right? Especially since it wasn't even our dorm building." Yui just shrugged. "Well, you know I'd never force you to do anything you don't want to do. But you missed out on a lot of fun," Itsuka told her. Setsuna groaned. "Did she? I mean, I still need to apologize to Midoriya for." Yui looked up sharply in alarm, suddenly enough to make Setsuna cut herself off. Both of the other girls gave her pointed glances. "Something wrong?" Itsuka asked. "No, She swallowed, fighting everything to keep the color off her cheeks. "I just misheard you. I thought you said something else." A lie. She had reacted to Midoriya's name, and Setsuna knew it, too. Anyway, Setsuna continued, though casting a glance toward Yui that read, "We'll talk about that later. I have to apologize for upsetting him. Mina said she'd do it in the morning, but obviously I haven't seen him since then." "What did you even do?" Itsuka asked, annoyed. "I don't know Midoriya all that well, but I can't imagine him getting upset about anything. He's like ... like a cinnamon roll." "Yeah," thought Yui, remembering how warm the jacket had felt against her chest. "Yeah, he is. Oh, we just harassed him about Uraraka a little. That's all." "For goodness sake," Itsuka scolded. "You really ought to leave well enough alone, Setsuna." The lizard girl held her hands up. "In my defense, I really did think that he was aware of how much romantic tension he has with her. I thought it'd be fine to joke about a little, especially since it's been going on for almost 2 years now. That does not give you an excuse to butt into situations where you have no business being in." "He doesn't like her," Yui blurted. "Huh." Both Setsuna and Itsuka whipped around to look at her. "I mean," she sniffed nervously, "he doesn't like Uraraka like that. That's why it's never occurred to him." Setsuna raised an eyebrow. What makes you think that? It's a little bit obvious, she nearly whispered, forcing the other two to lean in to hear her. Do you think he's gay or something? Shit, if that's true, I understand what made him so ma. No, I don't think so. Yui frowned. Itsuka blinked at her. This is the most you've ever interrupted us, Yui. You know how she is, Setsuna said, stretching and looking away. Yui's always making observations when you don't know it. She's just making sure we've got our facts straight. Isn't that right? Yui gave her a dry look. You got me all figured out, huh? Still, I need to apologize. Him being upset like that felt so wrong. It was one of those moments where I instantly knew I'd screwed up. Like she snapped her fingers. I'm sure no one from class blames you, Itsuka reassured. I can talk to Ida and Momo if you want. Nah, it's fine. If they do blame me, that's their choice. I'll just win them back over by being super nice. Itsuka said something else after that, but Yui wasn't listening anymore. She was thinking about last night again. He came to the roof because Setsuna drove him off with her teasing. When I asked him if Setsuna sent him, he said no. But she really kind of did, didn't she? A small little giggle escaped her mouth. Both the others looked at her again. You're acting really weird today, you know, Setsuna told her. Meanwhile, during Class A's break time, Izuku was leaning over his desk and looking through one of his notebooks. Behind him, Mainta and Kaminari were making noise, preoccupied with each other. Bakugo had gone elsewhere in the room to spend the break, so he faced no threat from the desks in his immediate vicinity. It wasn't like he'd be dead if someone caught him with his notebooks, but it was sort of embarrassing. Randomly, he felt a pinprick on the top of his head, and saw movement up ahead. He looked up. Sitting 2 seats in front of him, and 1 seat in front of Bakugo's now empty desk, was Toru Hagakure. He swore he'd just seen her move a little, but it was hard to tell. Currently, her uniform was facing forward, meaning logically, her head was facing that way too. But it was impossible to know. He found himself squinting, trying to look for any tells about where she was looking. And then, suddenly, see something you like, Midoriya. He started, and flushed red. You know that I can't, he replied quickly. Does she have eyes in the back of her head or what? He'd gotten better at responding to teases like that in a speedy fashion. Though I still broke down last night. Hagakure giggled. Sorry. She stood up and walked over to talk to Ishido. Izuku draped an arm over the top of his notebook, just to be safe. Had Hagakure really been looking at him? Why would she look at him? Whatever, it didn't matter. This particular notebook was a new one. Well, it wasn't exactly new, but it was not even close to finished. Progress on it was slow, the reason being this was his analysis notebook on the Class B students. Even though they trained and hung out together as classes more often than they used to, he still didn't have the strongest idea about any of them. All of their notes were slim compared to the notes he had on Class A, and his drawings of them were all pretty rudimentary, considering he didn't get to see them often and looking at pictures of them felt sleazy. He had the most info on Kendo, Shizaki, and Honuki, having seen their quirks in action the most. Monoma and Tetsu had a decent amount of info, but not as much as the first 3, and then everyone else was limited info only. But today, he found himself flipping to his page for Yui Kodai. The markings were faded, and he tried to remember the last time he'd edited anything on this page. It had been months at least. His quirk notes were a mere 3 sentences, and looking at the picture he'd drawn of her, it doesn't do justice to her at all. The eyes are far too dull. The cheeks aren't quite round enough, and I didn't really capture the subtlety of that expression she always has. He realized Mainta and Kaminari had gotten a bit quiet, and in a moment of self-aware paranoia, he closed the book. The bell rang a moment later, meaning they had to move from homeroom to their next class. Midoriya packed up quickly and stood up to join Uraraka, Ada, and Todoroki, as well as the rest of the students, and heading out the door. Man, this day is only a half day and it's already lasting forever, Uraraka complained. Only 2 more classes and then we're out of here for winter break. I am beginning to think that a Friday night celebration was not such a good idea after all, said Ida. Even though Says are only half days, we could have had it tonight instead and not worried about school the next morning. Todoroki shrugged. It's not like we are going over anything important today anyway. Ishido suddenly appeared next to them. Midori. Izuku let out a little squeak of surprise, and then turned to look at her. She had a worried expression on her face. What is it, Ishido-san? They walked out of the classroom and into the hallway. Next door, Class B was streaming out as well. Mina folded her hands together in a begging gesture. I forgot to tell you earlier because I slept in, but I'm really sorry. She closed her eyes. Me and Setsuna took things too far last night during the game, and I'm sorry for upsetting you. Izuku looked around nervously and saw that they were attracting attention in the hallway. Bakugo was watching with an annoyed expression. Some of the Class B people were listening in interest, and worst of all, Uraraka was right there. Mina was at least smart enough to explicitly leave out what she and Setsuna had upset him about, but still. Don't worry about it, Ishido. I'm already over it. I forgive you. She relaxed and exhaled. You're such a good guy, Midori. It had me up for a while last night because I felt so bad. What happened? Uraraka asked, confused. I know Deku left the party early, but… Tisk, said Bakugo loudly. Who cares? Can we just move on to chemistry now? A flash of annoyance went through Izuku's brain. Who does he think he is? I thought we'd gotten past him being such a prick all the time. But he literally didn't have the energy or even the motivation to draw things out further, so he just said, okay, Kaken, whatever, in a fairly dismissive tone. Huh. Bakugo raised an eyebrow. Oh no. Damn Deku, get over yourself. I'm just trying to get us out of the way of the hallway. Yui walked through the front gate of the school, heading for homeroom. Thoughts were plaguing her mind. Kodai, hello. Nakai and Shizune were both waving at her from just inside the schoolyard. Around them, people were already heading in, but they were just standing by a bench, both drinking juice out of cans. Yui hurried over to them. You two. You're gonna be late if you aren't careful. Nakai laughed. He was already tall for 12, and as laid back as ever. Why bother being careful when I have you to cover for me, Kodai? That's true, said Shizune. She adjusted her glasses on her face. You do seem to suck up all the careful in the school and leave none for the rest of us. Both of them laughed, and Yui just shook her head in sad frustration. We've got to go, she told them again. Homeroom is starting in just a couple of minutes. Hurry up and finish those. Why are you drinking cold juice out here anyway? You're gonna get chills in your chest. Shizune blinked. Is that a thing? Kodai says it is, so I'm inclined to believe her. Nakai threw his can into the nearby trash. Let's go, then. No use changing her mind now. They began to walk toward the school building. Nakai stretched his arms behind his shoulders. Not looking forward to science today, he said with a yawn. I didn't do the homework. What? Yui exclaimed in alarm. Did you fall asleep too early? Or did you perhaps not understand the material? Nakai, if you're struggling in science, I can help you. He laughed over her words. I didn't fall asleep at all, as a matter of fact. I was up late playing Forge. Those games are bad for you, she scolded. Seriously, sometimes I wonder if everyone here has a self-destructive streak except me. Just this morning Saya was trying to walk to school without her jacket. That's Saya, Shizune asked, pointing. Yui turned her head to follow the finger. Saya was walking along the schoolyard with a group of their senpais, talking and laughing with them. Yui blinked. She could not understand. Saya had gone in the back gate to get to her homeroom, right? What was happening? Why was she here? And why was she talking with them? And why did she look so happy? Saya, Yui yelled across the yard without thinking. What are you doing? Panicked, confused, she began to run toward her best friend. Oh, no, she heard Nakai mutter behind her. Saya turned, and an expression of complete fright and embarrassment crossed her face as she saw Yui running toward her. The senpais turned too, and some of them were laughing and pointing. Saya took a step backward, as if meaning to start running away, and then tripped and fell. Yui slid to a sudden, alarm stop. The older kids saw Saya fall, and they laughed even harder. They began to walk off. Yui could overhear one say, "We'll leave you to your girlfriend, then." Saya was laid out on the concrete path of the schoolyard, trying to sit up. Her face was a dark red. Her eyes glistened with tears. Yui took the last few steps toward her. Saya, are you all right? Did you twist your ankle? Did you? She reached out to help her friend up. No, Saya shouted, and slapped Yui's hand away. Stop it. Stop. Stop what? Yui squeaked, confused and frightened. It, Saya repeated, even louder, hysterical. Just, everything you do. Everything you say to me. Stop it. I hate you. Just go away. She got to her feet, everyone in the schoolyard watching, and ran toward the building, tears streaming out behind her. Yui remained planted in place, shocked into silence. She did not say a word, and none of them at that school ever heard her say one again. Class B was leaving their classroom now, as the bell rang for next period. Yui followed Itsuka and Setsuna out. Next door, Classa was leaving as well. Yui lifted her head. The flow of people had stopped, and it seemed like some congestion was taking place in the hallway in front of them. She peered around Setsuna's back to get a closer look. It was Mina Ashido, saying something to Izuku Midoriya. Too far last night during the game, and I'm sorry for upsetting you. Huh, Midoriya answered. Yui watched him closely. Several things flashed across his face. Several negative things. She could tell. But then he returned to a weak, sheepish smile. Don't worry about it, Ashido. I'm already over it. I forgive you. Class A had all stopped to watch this unfold, meaning Class B could not get through. Tetsu and Monoma were both trying to push forward, and it looked like Itsuka was about to say something, but the conversation was still continuing. Cares. Can we just move on to chemistry now? That was Bakugo talking. Yui had never really formed an opinion on the boy, even though most of Class B found him really annoying. He was certainly less annoying than he used to be, though that thing he'd just said was more like the old Bakugo. Okay Kaken, whatever, Midoriya responded, and Yui's mouth twitched. That's right. They knew each other as children. Huh. Damn Deku, get over yourself. I'm just trying to get us out of the way of the hallway. A convenient excuse to be rude, Yui thought, but she knew Itsuka was seconds away from agreeing. Can you guys move on? The orange-haired girl said loudly. We've got a class to get to. There it was. The crowd scattered, and Deku stormed off, leaving Midoriya standing there. His face had fallen for a moment, but when he saw the Class B students approaching, he quickly brought that nervous smile back to his face and began to walk off, following his class. Hey, Midoriya, wait up, Setsuna said. Yui frowned. He's hiding something. She shouldn't talk to him now. Oh, hello, Takage, he said, letting her catch up to him. Yui and Izuku followed at a bit of a distance. Hey, I just wanted to say that I'm sorry, too. She looked pointedly ahead, where Uraraka and Ida were pretty far away now, out of earshot. If I'd known that you didn't like Uraraka, then I wouldn't have taken things so far. For a moment, Yui felt panicked. Setsuna trusts me far too much. I only suspect he might not like Uraraka, and I'm not 100% sure. Then, Midoriya said, that's okay, Takage, and Yui relaxed. Wait, why am I so relieved by this? She was confused by her own brain. To be honest, I'm sorry too. I hope I didn't make things too awkward by leaving. Nah, you're fine. Setsuna clapped him on the shoulder. I'm glad there's no hard feelings. Mina was right. You're a really nice and thoughtful guy. Ichihi, thanks. Yui realized she was frowning again. What's gotten into me? Are you sure you're okay? Itsuka asked the boy. If you need me to say anything to someone else in my class. Midoriya actually laughed at that. That won't be necessary, Kendo-san. I have nothing against Class B in fact, after I left the party. He met eyes with Yui and suddenly closed his mouth. Nothing. Never mind. Yui's eyes widened. In a split second, he'd become aware that she didn't want Setsuna or Itsuka to know about their time on the roof. A thoughtful boy indeed. Setsuna and Itsuka walked on ahead, leaving Midoriya and Yui to walk next to each other for a moment. Did you get enough sleep? He asked her in a low voice. She was trying to fight her lips lifting up into a smile. I did. Thank you for asking. She looked up toward her two friends to ensure they hadn't noticed them, and ended up seeing Deku leading the pack of students toward the stairs. She frowned. What's his deal? She asked, nodding forward. Midoriya's sheepish smile faltered for a moment. I nearly broke his mask. Perhaps I shouldn't have. We have history. He used to hate me a lot, but it's been better recently. He can still be abrasive sometimes though. Why did he hate you? Why, you're awfully straightforward. Huh. Well, I used to think it was because I hadn't manifested my quirk, but later I found out it was because he thought I was better than him. Because one time he fell into a river and I tried to help him up. Yui froze. You tried ... to help him up. Ooh, yeah. Is that hard to believe or something? It's true, I swear. I believe you, she told him, softly. Yes, she believed him. She knew it was true because the exact same thing had happened to her. Yui Kodai did not know it, but her heart had started racing faster around him. It was no small flurry, either. The flakes began to fall at 9 p.m. and continued throughout the night, until a whole dumping of the stuff, 8 centimeters deep, had settled in the morning as the sun came up. Class A's earliest risers, Momo, Shoji, and Aoyama, noticed it first. Blankets of white out over UAS formerly green campus. They alerted the others, and suddenly people like Mina and Kaminari were up far earlier than they would normally be on a day during break. Hey, Deku. Uraraka called to him, bouncing up to where he was standing by the kitchen counter. I think everybody's gonna put on their winter clothes and go out to play in the snow. You coming with? Maybe later. Izuku stared out the window into the white. Not that I don't like the snow, but I need some time to myself to think this morning. Sorry, Uraraka. She seemed hurt for a moment, but then said, that's fine, Deku. If it's anything I can help with ... just let me know, okay. And then she bounced away, as fast as she'd appeared. After over a year of friendship, she still sometimes surprised him with how quickly she could sneak up. And yet ... the way I feel about her is not the same way I feel about. He couldn't get Yui Kodai out of his mind. He was comparing the two because both were girls, and they even sort of looked similar. And they activate their quirks the same way. If he told Todoroki about this, the boy might go off the deep end again and make another conspiracy board. But still, why couldn't he stop thinking about her? Is my brain just running on hyperdrive again? He'd had a desire to improve her notebook entry but hadn't gotten around to it yet. Often, if Izuku's brain thought about doing a task, it would focus on nothing else until he actually took care of it. But this time felt different from the other times that had happened. She's officially the person in Class B I've said the most words to now, I think. Isn't that ironic? Considering how quiet and withdrawn she was. That was it. Yui was withdrawn. Withdrawn and mysterious. He wanted to know more about her. That curiosity ... it had simply never been there with Uraraka or Ida, since they were so talkative. You got a grip on their personality and experiences really quickly. He'd felt a similar draw to Tsuyu back in the early days, but she'd quickly divulged a lot about herself as well. Those were 3 of his 4 closest friends. The last was Todoroki, who was sort of a special case, since they'd become friends and learned about each other through fighting. he had to dismiss it. So, I want to be her friend. But it is going to be 100 times more difficult than making friends with the others. Not just because she's in a different class, but because I'm the one who will have to take all the initiative. That was the reason his brain was hyperfixating on her. Definitely, it couldn't possibly be anything else. Izuku blushed and went back upstairs. He decided that he still wanted to enjoy the weather, even if he was going to work on his notebook away from everyone else. But he couldn't go back to ground level. He could hear them out there, pelting snowballs at each other and such. They would ask him to join in, and there would be an awkward moment. No, better to find someplace else. He opened the notebook and stared at Kodai's page again. The roof it is. He went up to the trapdoor, now dressed in a hat and coat and gloves. He knew it would still be broken and easily pushed open, since he still had the shrunken padlock on him. He kept forgetting to ask Yaoyorozu to make a new one, mainly because his mind had been elsewhere. Still, this was lucky. Poking up out of the trapdoor, he was immediately greeted with a rush of cold, biting wind. Overhead, the sky was completely gray, combining with the white snow below which covered everything to create some kind of ethereal dreamscape. His boot pressed against the concrete, carving through the soft layer of snow. It was several centimeters deep. A lot must have fallen. At least it stopped now. Though the wind was still blowing, at least he wouldn't be out here in a blizzard, wet snowflakes landing on his notebook pages. He closed the trapdoor behind him to keep the cold air out of the building and walked over to the edge of the roof. His boots left prints in the snow. He hoped those wouldn't be visible from the school building, which was higher up the hill from the dorms. At the edge of the roof, he hung his legs over and opened his notebook to work on it. Somewhere off to his right, he could hear Ishido's trademark cackling, and then a scream that might have been Kaminari or Shiro. He hoped they didn't come around to the back of the building and spot him. Then again, it's a snowball fight, so there's gonna be a lot of movement. A bit nervously, he pulled his legs back, scooting away from the edge to make himself less visible. Just in case. He added a few sentences to Yui's profile. Most notably, he added, can choose to talk a bit more if she wants to. That was another thing. She'd chosen to say quite a lot to him that night on the roof. And then, again she'd actually asked him about Bakugo. She'd asked him a personal question. Had anyone else ever had Yui Kodai ask them a personal question? What could the meaning of that be? She wanted to talk to me. Still, a few measly sentences just wasn't enough. He simply didn't know enough about her to make her profile as elaborate as those in Class A, or even Kendo's. And her drawing still didn't do her justice. Frustrated, he tilted his head up to the sky but didn't make it all the way. His head stopped at normal level, because something caught his eye. On this side of the Class A dorm, a small span of woods thrust up in between the buildings from the main forest, like an outstretched finger. Across those woods was the Class B dorm. And sitting on the roof of that dorm, several hundred yards away, was Yui Kodai herself. And she was staring at him. Izuku got to his feet, his heart racing. He put the notebook in his large coat pocket, debating on what to do. Should I go back inside? No, I can't just leave, that would be awkward. But her staring at me like that is awkward too. As it always did when he freaked out like this, the most confident idea briefly came to him. But he couldn't do that. He just didn't have it in him. It was reckless, against the rules, and it might freak her out. But it's the only way forward. Izuku sighed, crouched, and let one for all course through his body. Yui's eyes widened. Wait, what is he doing? She could see the green lightning sparking out from him even from here, proof that his quirk was activated. Wait, Midoriya wouldn't possibly do that. He's not confident like that but then, he did. Her shimmering eyes tilted up, her jaw dropped, as she watched Midoriya leap high into the sky with his quirk, crossing the open span of woods that lay between their dorm buildings. He plummeted back down toward the Class B roof, and landed with the POW right next to her. His lightning spread out in a release of power, and he kicked up a wave of snow as he landed, bending his knees in an expert landing. Yui felt a shiver pass over her, like goosebumps all over her body. The snow and lightning cleared out of her vision to reveal him, standing back up straight with a confident grin. Hello, Kodai, he said. Funny meeting you here. She blushed deeply. That was the hottest thing ever. Is he aware of what he's doing to me? Hello, she said in a soft voice, barely a whisper that got carried away on the cold wind. His smile remained, but she thought she saw some color in his cheeks. Just the weather. Or was he having trouble maintaining the facade? Sorry, it's just. I saw you were looking at me and so I was wondering if you needed to tell me something. Ah, there was the stutter. No, I was just staring at you. But she couldn't say that out loud. She'd panicked when he'd noticed her. She hadn't expected him to look up from that notebook he was so engrossed in. Secretly she'd been hoping for a chance for them to not talk, but just be in each other's presence. But she'd expected him to turn and bolt when he'd noticed her. But now, he was actually here. So she had to say something. Roof buddies stick together, right? She half whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. Then, she gently patted the spot on the roof next to where she was sitting. Midoriya's smile widened, and he let out a genuine laugh that warmed her chest. He sat down where she'd patted. Roof buddies. I like that. I don't know if we should make a habit of this, though. After a small pause, Yui said, maybe just on snow days. Haha, yeah. My whole class is playing out on the other side of the building. but I needed some time to think. But I still wanted to enjoy the day, so needed some time to think. About that?" she asked, pointing at the pocket where she'd seen him put his notebook. For some reason, he turned red. Yeah. Just had some stuff I needed to add. Briefly, Yui wondered in fear if he was some kind of secret pervert, like a more covert version of the short kid from his class. "No, I've heard his notebooks are all for hero stuff. I wonder what they look like." But she'd barely been brave enough to ask him about Bakugo. Considering how flustered he was, the notebook just seemed generally personal, not necessarily in an embarrassing way though. She wouldn't breach his privacy like that. Still, he looked really cute when he got all into it like that. Part of the reason she'd been staring in the first place. For a long minute, they sat in silence, both staring ahead, listening to the distant sounds of their schoolmates at play. Then, one of the trees below could no longer take the weight of the snow, and one of its branches cracked, falling to the forest floor and kicking up white dust everywhere. Yui started in surprise, unintentionally letting out a cute little squeak. She looked down at the woods. Midoriya laughed again. "The tea trees look really nice with all the snow on them, Yes, she agreed quietly, staring down at them. Like a winter wonderland. While Kodai stared down at the trees, he could only look at her. Inwardly, he told himself it was for his drawing. Her blue eyes were wide, inquisitive, searching. Her high, round cheeks were just a tad pink, as was the tip of her slightly angular nose. Her full lips rested together, closed. She was wearing a heavy blue coat that matched her eyes. Covering part of her black bob cut was a cream-colored knitted winter hat, and she had a scarf around her neck that matched. The whole color scheme was just aesthetically pleasing. Kodai herself was aesthetically pleasing. He swallowed a lump in his throat, trying to dismiss the weird thoughts swimming in his brain, and noticed that her hat and scarf looked crocheted. A strange question came to him. Did you make those yourself, Kodai?" She looked back at him in surprise. He was pointing at her scarf and hat. For a moment, they stared into each other's eyes. Izuku trembled a little under her penetrating stare. His heart was racing a mile a minute for some reason. Then, her lips turned up a little, and she nodded. I like to crochet," he suggested. She nodded again. He smiled. "That's really neat, Kodai. I don't know much about it, but they're very good." She looked away from him, her head down. She seemed to fidget for a moment. It was adorable. "Thank you." His phone went off. He pulled it out. "Oh man, it is looking for me." He pocketed it and stood up. "I'm sorry, Kodai. I've got to go. But maybe I'll see you around." She smiled enigmatically at him, and nodded. "See you around, roof buddy. Haha. And as quickly as he had come, he jumped away, his heart still racing. "Why do I feel like this?" he wondered. "It can't possibly be that." Yep, thought Yui as she watched him jump away, still just as hot as when he'd done it the first time. It's definitely that. Being quiet and in her own thoughts meant that Yui Kodai was very in touch with herself. She never spent very long being in denial with herself once she figured something out. And that something, this time, was that she was attracted to Izuku Midoriya. He's cute, nice, mysterious, and has a weird hot confident side. Plus, he is easier to talk to for some reason. And we have more in common than he realizes. One small problem, though. Just because he was easier to talk to than some others did not mean he was easy to talk to. Yui Kodai barely found anyone easy to talk to. She couldn't just come out and say, "Hey, we have a lot in common actually. We share similar trauma about friendships during grade school. And also I know you're hiding your pain behind a mask." That would make him hate her so fast. Besides, why else would he wear a mask and hide that sort of thing, if not to avoid being pitied or worried over? Boys hated being pitied and worried over, especially if they were training to be heroes. She couldn't end up with another with another Seiya situation. "He noticed my hat and scarf," she thought distantly, blushing. He complimented them. It wouldn't be hard to just avoid him and let the feelings drift away on their own. They weren't even in the same class, after all. But Yui didn't want to avoid him. She wanted to learn more about him. She had only been half joking with the roof buddy thing. She felt like she could just spend time with him up here on these roofs every day and never get tired of it. "I simply don't have enough information to make a decision right now." She would have to find out more about him. Maybe the mysterious factor was most of what he had going for him, and once she knew him better, the feelings would fade away. That might be best for everyone. The problem was, finding out more about him would require her to be extroverted. She would have to actively seek him out. And how on earth was she going to do that without Setsuna or Itsuka catching wind of it and harassing her? Speaking of Setsuna and Itsuka, she ran into them as she returned to the Class B common room. "There you are, Yui," said Setsuna. "Oh, and you're already in your winter gear." Yui hummed questioningly. A bunch of their classmates were gathered up in the room, all dressed to go outside. "Class is playing out in the snow. We're about to go ambush them with snowballs," said Monoma. "Join us, Kodai-san." "Don't put it like that," Itsuka snapped at him. "It's just a bit of fun, not one of your evil schemes." She turned back to Yui with expectant eyes. "You don't have to come if you don't want to." Yui said nothing. She just stepped forward and blinked. A wide toothy grin spread across Setsuna's face. "Perfect. All right, troops. Let's move out. This will be good." even if Midoriya is not there. If the others get used to seeing me in the group setting ... it will seem less strange if I try to seek him out in the future. So Yui joined her classmates, heading out into the snow, towards battle with Class A. Izuku walked downstairs, and then out into the common room. It was deserted, and all the lights were off, leaving only the white snowlight from outside to stream in the windows. Confused, he headed outside and down the steps. His boots crunched in the snow, looking around. He could only see white, turning in a circle. Ida, he called. Are you out here? Did you need me for something? GH. Izuku fell over as the white moved and tackled him to the ground. Snow was kicked up as they rolled, and he heard girlish laughter. Suddenly, Ada and Uraraka appeared out from behind a tree, also laughing. Then, Mina and Kaminari appeared, coming around the corner. Did you capture him? Mina asked. It was easy, said his tackler, who he now realized was Hagakure. She was wearing a white coat and white pants that blended in perfectly with the snow. Her head was, of course, invisible, and she was on top of him. Izuku blushed and squirmed out from beneath her. That was, see, certainly clever, Hagakure, he complimented. She giggled again. You looked right at me, but you must have been really focused on finding Ada. Or perhaps you're thinking about something else. No. Ada said he needed me for something. Izuku looked toward his bespectacled friend. Don't tell me you played along with this. Well. Ada coughed and averted his eyes. I know you told me you needed time to think, but it had been a while, and I know you have a tendency to get too engrossed in a task, so. I'm sorry, Midoriya. It was Hagakure and Uraraka's idea, mostly. Hey, Ashido complained. Give me credit, too. Meanwhile, Uraraka and Hagakure had both whirled on Ada. Oh, so you're just gonna blame us then, huh? Ada looked at them in alarm. I wanna take it back. Hey, wait. Then, both girls were suddenly pelting him with snowballs. Ada screamed and ran for it. The two of them gave chase, laughing maniacally. Izuku felt himself smile with glee as he stood up ... and was nearly knocked over again by Ashido as she went barreling past. Hey, wait for me. They took off running around the corner of the building. Come on, Midoriya. Kaminari's voice. He ran up even with the boy, and then the two of them followed behind the others. Man ... you're ... so lucky. Kaminari breathed as he ran. Even after 2 years, the electricity user still didn't have the greatest stamina. Lucky. Izuku raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? They rounded the corner and saw Ada and the girls ahead of them. Kaminari nodded forward. To have girls want you around ... and then tackle you like that. Oh, Izuku flushed. Well, it's just because Hagakure's invisible. Her quirk was good for the ambush. If she was a boy, things would have played out the same way. Kaminari shook his head, as if disappointed. Midoriya ... one day, you'll learn. Izuku frowned. And maybe one day you'll learn to pace yourself properly. Hey ... cut me some slack ... we've been out here for like, an hour. The other boy gasped. Ada was running toward Kirishima and Shiro now, who both turned to look in surprise. Help! Ada screamed, pointing back toward Mina, who had now pulled in front of Uraraka and Hagakure. Isn't she your responsibility? Kirishima and Shiro exchanged a glance, and then both laughed. Hi, we may be her friend, but you're our class rep. That means we're all your responsibility. Ada received a point-blank projectile snowball to the back of the neck, enough to knock him over into the snow. Mina lowered her arm like an expert pitcher, a toothy grin across her face. Target eliminated, she said, right as Uraraka and Hagakure caught up, and slid to a stop. Yaoyorozu and Jiraiya were both watching from a nearby tree. Ajiro was sitting on the branch above them. All three of them left. Izuku looked around at the scene and decided, okay, maybe I can stay out here and spend some time with my class for a little while. Oh, hey Midoriya, said Kirishima. They managed to get you out here after all. Yeah. Izuku realized everyone was looking at him, and felt uncomfortable. Are they still thinking about how I stormed out of the party? It was like those memes he'd seen of a whole family looking at the camera with the caption like, look who finally decided to come out of their cave. He had a clump of snow still attached to his coat, though ... with one arm behind his back, he shaped it into a small, hard snowball. Kirishima was still looking at him with a pleasant, friendly grin. Izuku raised his arm and threw the snowball at his face. GH. The red-haired boy staggered. If everyone had been laughing hard before, they were laughing even harder now. Kirishima wiped the snow off his face, said, oh, it's on. And then the chaos began. Ashido rushed to defend Izuku as Kirishima gave chase, pelting him with her quickly made armada of snowballs. But then Shiro was there, and Shiro had one of the best natural throwing arms in the class. For a moment, it was a crazy four-way battle, Izuku caught in the middle of the chaos. Then, Ada hit Ashido in the ear with one, and she turned on him, joining Hagakure in chasing him in a wide circle. Kirishima and Shiro continued to close in on Izuku, as he backed up, trying to defend himself by raising his arms, laughing the whole time. Psst, Deku, hey, Uraraka, his savior, hiding behind a small snow wall she'd just made, and now popping out to attack Kirishima and Shiro. Izuku jumped back and rolled behind it, then joined her in the trench warfare, just throwing his arm above their cover and taking blind shots. Apparently, one of these blind shots hit Ajiro in the tree and knocked him off. Izuku saw this out of the corner of his eye and shrieked, "Oh no, I quote am so sorry." Kirishima tried to jump the wall, and Uraraka squealed, rolling beneath and behind him as he landed, and hitting him twice more in the back. Then, she ran into Shiro, ducked under his swiping arm, and scurried away, giggling. Ajiro was now throwing snowballs at Izuku, but one accidentally hit Shiro, and the tape user rounded on him. Kaminari tried to join in and help, but suddenly Gyro jumped him from behind, and dunked a huge amount of snow into his hood. Kaminari screamed like a girl and fell to the ground. Izuku looked around wildly and saw that Yaoyorozu was now helping Ida fight back against Hagakure and Ashido's advances. The snowball melee began to compress, groups of fighters getting closer and closer as those with the advantage pushed the defenders into a circle. Izuku knocked into Gyro, apologized awkwardly, turned around, and saw at least a dozen more people running down toward their group from the hill. From the Class B dorm. "Guys," he yelled, pointing. "Incoming." All of Class A turned and saw their enemies closing in. Itsuka Kendo was leading the charge, a glint of unmistakable excitement in her teal eyes. Her arm was raised back over her head. "Look alive, Class A," she shouted, and pelted Momo in the shoulder at a distance of 40 yards. The raven-haired girl gasped and fell backward into the snow. All of Class A stopped and looked at each other, dumbly. Class B was closing the distance. "Don't just stand there," Kirishima roared. "We've got to defend ourselves." Just like that, they were all allies again, reaching down and gathering up as much snow as they could. Uraraka got behind Izuku. "Cover me quickly, Deku. I'm gonna make some more walls." Ajiro got 2 snowballs and jumped back up into the tree. Class A began to group up in a battle formation. Class B's snowballs came whistling in from above. Ashido dodged one, another hit Kaminari in the face. Monoma streamed ahead of Kendo, cackling madly. "Eat snow, dirtbags." His voice was filled with glee. And he was promptly pelted with a dozen snowballs at once, from just as many different directions. He fell into the snow and rolled, Itsuka still behind him. "Great job being the bait," she shouted. "You sucked up all their ammo." "Oh no," Momo gasped. It was part of her strategy. The rest of Class B had arrived now, and were relentless in their assault. They'd come prepared with tons and tons. Oase drove back Shiro, while Tetsutetsu targeted Kirishima. Pony Tsunotori and Setsuna Takage closed in on Ashido and Hagakure. Gyro and Momo ducked behind Uraraka's walls to make more ammo. Ajiro jumped down onto Kiwaro from above, hitting him with both snowballs in midair. The war began to devolve into chaos, individual clashes. Laughter and joyful screams split the cold air. Izuku didn't really have anyone in Class B he wanted to target in particular, he thought as he gathered up some snowballs behind another barricade. Uraraka had been next to him a second ago, but now she was gone. Noise continued all around him. "Maybe I should go after Takage." A snowball hit him in the butt. Izuku whirled, standing up as he did so, only to receive another snowball to the face, and then another, and then another. He spat, lifting one arm to retaliate and another to block, and ended up dropping a lot of his snowballs. He managed a weak throw, but the person was assaulting him relentlessly, and giggling a lot. He dropped his defenses when he realized who it was. His eyes bugged out in shock. Kodai. Her deep blue eyes were twinkling, and she was unmistakably grinning, as she continued to pelt him. Izuku laughed, suddenly blushing for some reason even as she was causing him pain. Kodai ... hold on a second. PFFFD. She ran out of snowballs. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then, Izuku grinned evilly and gathered up some snow as quickly as he could. Yui's eyebrows went up, and then she turned to run. Izuku nailed her in the side, and then missed his second throw as she went low, ducking on the other side of the snow barricade. "Oh no," she gasped, still laughing. Izuku ran over. "You dare use my class's defenses against me." He leaned over the barricade and prepared to drop a ton of snow on her head, but then she kicked through the wall, dumping snow all over his feet and causing him to lose his footing. Izuku windmilled his arms, trying to regain his balance. Kodai hopped to her feet, bopped him on the nose with a finger, and then danced lightly around him in a circle. He turned and tried to catch her, but she scraped by just out of reach. "When did you get so agile?" She was running backwards away from him, still watching his every move. He gave chase, feigning a snowball hit, and she ran into the tree. Yui squealed and stumbled. Izuku took his chance and leapt forward, the two of them rolling on the ground, laughing. They left imprints on the snow with their bodies, and rolled to a stop, gasping for breath. Yui on top of him. Izuku looked up at her, still laughing, but also concerned. "Are you okay? You hit that tree pretty hard." He realized what position they were in. Her hands were pressed flat against the snow on either side of him, and she was practically sitting in his lap. She rolled sideways off of him so they were both flat on their backs, next to each other, and then started giggling again. Izuku couldn't help it, he started giggling too. Even if he felt awkward, it was infectious. I'm really happy. I want to save people with a smile, but sometimes I have to put it on and pretend." Around her, it's like I don't have to pretend at all. Their laughter died down, and they realized it had gone quiet around them. Izuku and Yui sat up. A bunch of people had stopped fighting and were looking right at them. Kendo, Uraraka, and Ida were all staring in surprise. Ashido and Takage were grinning in excitement. Monoma and Kaminari had shocked looks on their faces, and everyone else just seemed kind of confused. Izuku felt a pang of panic. He waved his arms around frantically. It's not what it looks like. He turned to look at Yui. She had returned to her usual blank, neutral expression. She muttered, standing up. She had a snowball in her hand. She threw it right at Itsuka's face. Itsuka staggered, and then gasped, laughing. Yui-chan's declared it. It's every person for themselves. The snowball fight roared up again. It was complete chaos again, and Izuku and Yui left the center of attention. She turned around, still neutral, and helped him to his feet. I am sorry about that, she said. Don't worry, it wasn't your fault. You did a good job distracting them, ha. He scratched his neck, unsure of what to do. He knew he was smiling nervously again, and he felt her penetrating gaze on him. Wanna, form an alliance and go after some people. Her lips turned up a little. She watched as the two of them went around like perfect partners, like a perfect team. Like they'd known each other for years. It was unfathomable. It was ridiculous. It was disgusting. When had it happened? How could she, in all her observations, have missed this? How had it happened so quickly? That straight-faced, blue-eyed harlot ... who knew that her Izuku had such tastes. But he was making the girl smile. It would be hard to tell unless you were close up to them, but the watching girl was good at that sort of thing. She'd been observing her Izuku for a long time, oh yes, and he was smiling too. She made him genuinely happy. How on earth was the watching girl meant to compete? It was just ... just so unfair. So annoying. Grr ... if Kodai thinks she can take him from right under my nose, she has another thing coming. I know I've waited too long, I know I haven't been forward enough, I know. But it's time to change that. Time to change that very soon. And then, Izuku will realize he's meant for me. A voice snapped the watching girl out of her reverie. Hagakure, are you alright? Toru Hagakure blinked. Uraraka was shaking her gently by the shoulders, looking at where her face was with concern. Boo, yeah, Toru chirped, feigning her usual bubbliness. I'm fine. Okay, you were just standing still for a while there. It's hard to tell what's going on with you some of the time, you know. Uraraka smiled, and then the two of them jumped back into the snowball fight together. For a moment, Toru considered targeting Kodai and Izuku right now, but decided against it. I've been patient, I can be patient just a little while longer. Today was the 19th of December. It was Yui Kodai's birthday. Her birthday was always during winter break off school, so it had always been just her and her parents ... and before that, Seiya. No, don't think about that. But this year, much like last year, she was in a dorm surrounded by people who liked her. At least, she was pretty sure they liked her. They had no reason to dislike her, since she barely ever spoke to any of them. And that's how I like it. Right. In any case, beyond a basic happy birthday greeting when she came downstairs, none of the boys in Class B were acknowledging it any further. Not that she cared about the boys that much. Happy birthday, Yui, said Itsuka with a smile. She handed her a small wrapped package over the breakfast table. That's from both of us. Setsuna chimed in from the left. Yui blinked down at it, opening it gingerly. She did not want to waste good wrapping paper. Itsuka and Setsuna exchanged an amused glance over the girl's careful manner. Inside was a softer blue box, with golden leaflet writing on the top. It was loopy cursive and in English. Yui could not really read English that well. She ignored it and opened the box. Inside was a golden ring bracelet, simple but shiny and cool to the touch. Her eyebrows rose up just a tad, enough for Itsuka and Setsuna, watching intently, to notice. How much did this cost? She asked quietly. Her two friends looked at each other. Well, that's why it's from both of us. We had to pool our money. Yui continued to gaze down at it. You shouldn't have, she muttered, pursing her lips out a little, cutely. Put it on, Setsuna told her, nudging her arm excitedly. Yui shot her an annoyed glance, and then slowly put her right hand through the bracelet, stopping it at her wrist. She lifted up her arm and twisted it around, watching the light catch the gold at different angles. Itsuka pressed her palms together. It looks great. It looks great on you, Setsuna added. She reached up and pulled Yui's hair behind her ear. You're so pretty, Yui. If I didn't know you had the hots for Izuku, I would eat you up myself. Yui glared at her in alarm, and then looked around the breakfast table wildly. The only people in earshot were Tetsu and Awase, currently racing to chug orange juice. They were of course not listening. She sighed and relaxed, as Itsuka and Setsuna both laughed. So it's true after all? Itsuka asked. During the snowball fight I noticed but didn't want to say anything ... Of course, Setsuna isn't as accommodating as I am. Yui looked back and forth between them guiltily, and then slowly, imperceptibly, nodded. Hi. Setsuna clapped her hands. Do you need any help? No, Yui answered bluntly. The lizard girl drooped. I even went to the trouble of asking for permission instead of just starting to meddle on my own. Itsuka gave her a motherly scowl. The last time you meddled in Midoriya's love life, you made him storm out of the party, or did you forget? I didn't. Setsuna protested hotly. Anyway, Yui doesn't need my help. Based on the snowball fight incident, it seems like he's already head over heels. Yui bit her lip. They don't really know him at all. Setsuna continued. Anyway, Yui, it's your birthday today. Why don't you go out and find him? I bet even if he's busy, it's just with working out or something, and he's sure to forego that to hang out with you. But what if he interprets it the wrong way? Yui whispered. You'd best hope he interprets it which way is wrong, anyway. You want him to know you like him, don't you? Not right now. Yeah, but it's your birthday today, Itsuka put in. Surely Midoriya would be accommodating of that end. She stopped herself. Oh, Midoriya doesn't actually know that today's your birthday, does he? Yui shrugged miserably. Why would he know? They weren't in the same class. She didn't even know what his birthday was. Or anyone in Class A's for that matter. Boo, hey. Setsuna patted Itsuka's shoulder repeatedly like an irritating mosquito. What if you went over to their dorm, class pres, and talk to Yaoyorozu really loudly about birthdays and loudly mention that it's Yui's and make sure Izuku's in the room? I can bet that if he likes her then he'll immediately jump and try to do something before the day is over. Itsuka rolled her eyes and forcibly pried Setsuna off her. Even if I wanted to do something that convoluted, Midoriya is absolutely not the type to take action like that. You don't know him. Unable to take it any longer, Yui stood up rather abruptly. Thank you again for the bracelet. I really like it, she said softly, and then went back up to her room. Izuku was trying out a different tactic to focus. Instead of being up in his room while working on the notebook, he was down in the loud, boisterous common room. Sato, Kirishima, and surprisingly Bakugo were all making gingerbread men in the kitchen for the upcoming Christmas party, while Yaoyorozu, Hagakure, and Ashido were hanging up decorations. It was certainly noisy, but it was a busy kind of noise, the kind that Izuku suspected might actually increase his productivity and focus. The only potential distractions were the last two people in the room and the closest to him, since he was currently sitting on the couch. Kaminari and Mineta were both cross-legged on the floor about 5 feet away, playing some video game on the TV. Yaoyorozu walked past with the box in her hands, and scolded them. Couldn't you two make yourselves useful for once? Hey, Kaminari protested. The last time I offered to help, Gyro stabbed me and said I was assuming the girls couldn't handle it on their own. We're using the common room for its intended purpose, complained Mineta. What's next? Are you gonna complain that I'm using the bathroom to piss and tell me to go outside instead? Yaoyorozu rolled her eyes. Disgusting, she muttered. She then caught notice of Midoriya. What are you doing? She asked. Midoriya looked up, slightly annoyed at being distracted. Just writing in my notebook, he answered. Oh, Yaoyorozu smiled. Your notebook has notes for all of us in it, right? One day you'll have to show me the page you've made for me. He blushed, slightly. It's just a hobby, like the V video games these two are playing, he said. I don't really understand why you're commending me and scolding them. Midoriya, Mina gasped, stars in his eyes. Could you be on our side after all? Momo seemed perturbed. Right. Sorry for disturbing you. She walked away awkwardly. Kaminari made a show of swooning. Midoriya, I didn't know you were capable of shutdowns so effective. I've had you pegged wrong this whole time. Consider it leverage, Izuku mumbled. As repayment, try to play your game a little more quietly. I'm really trying to focus on this page and I need the end noise levels exactly right. Kaminari and Mineta exchanged a glance, and shrugged. Yes, sir. Anything for a fellow comrade. Izuku sighed and leaned closer into the pages, focusing intently on his drawing. Her nose is more like that ... and the reflection in her eyes comes in higher ... Oh, where's my eraser? His updated drawing of Kodai was taking shape. He had thought of a bunch of interesting uses for her quirk, as well. Yaoyorozu's words flashed back through his head. One day you'll have to show me the page you've made for me. Others, over the past year, had expressed similar desires to see what he had written about them. Would Kodai be the same? Of course, everyone who'd ever asked him had been someone in Class A, who knew him well. They all knew he was harmless, helpful, and altogether not a pervert. But Kodai might think differently since she wasn't as aware of his notebook habit, and what they actually entailed. Why do I want to show her so bad, anyway? Come to think of it, showing Kodai would be a good litmus test for showing Class B in general. She was now the one he knew best, he supposed. And she was so quiet and neutral. Surely she wouldn't have anything bad to say. But if she has a negative reaction, then it's probably safe to assume that the others will be similar. Yes, in that way it's a good way to test. Maybe Yaoyorozu is right, I should start showing people. After all, the quirk tips didn't do them any good if he just kept them to himself. Izuku tidied up some parts of the drawing, added some last-minute edits to the notes, and then began gathering up his pencils. Going somewhere? A feminine voice asked him. Izuku looked up. Hagakure's clothed form was standing over the couch. It seemed from the way her sleeves bent that her hands were on her hips. Izuku's face twitched. Why do you want to know? Do you need my help with something, Hagakure? Randomly, he remembered that day in the classroom when he'd been working on this same notebook page. Hagakure had caught him off guard that day, too. Could it be that she's spying on me? That made him panic a little, and more heat rose in his cheeks as he tried to speed up his process of putting his pencils away in their case. No, not particularly, the invisible girl giggled. Behind them, Kaminari and Mineta had stopped their video game, and were watching. I can't help but notice you've been working a lot on one page in your notebook in particular, Midoriya, she said. I've noticed it 3 times now, and I'm not even looking on purpose. But you don't make an attempt to hide it from me like you do the others because you never know which way my head is facing. What's all this about? He stammered. It's about your particular fixation on a certain dark-haired girl in our opposing class. I can't help but wonder what it means. She giggled again. The sound was perfectly superficial, as was her curiosity, but Izuku couldn't help but shudder. The whole situation felt oddly sinister. It's just, he coughed, growing redder and redder. It's just that I've been working more on the Class B notes in general, and Kodai just happens to be the person I'm working on now, and you've just happened to start noticing recently because ... yeah. He got to his feet frantically and moved to step away from her. Wait, Kodai. Kaminari raised his eyebrows in alarm. I knew it. He thrusted a finger at Midoriya. Don't think that we forgot what we saw out there in the snow. Wait, what? Minda asked, since he hadn't been there. What happened in the snow? Midoriya and Kodai were rolling around and laughing together. It was the most emotion I've ever seen that girl show. Ever. Minda's laser gaze turned toward Izuku. So you're a traitor after all, then, he intoned in a cold, damning voice. Meanwhile, Hagakure was just standing there watching. What on earth was her goal here? Izuku backed away out of the seating area slowly, not taking his eyes off of where her face was. You guys shouldn't accuse him like that, she scolded the 2 boys. I'm sure I've just gotten the wrong idea. Isn't that right, Midoriya? That's right. So you better not tell a soul about this, especially Ashido. Since it's just a baseless theory. No merit to it at all. Of course. You can't tell, but I'm winking. You can trust me, Midoriya-kun. Don't you worry, and I'll try not to notice your notebook so much in the future. Something about it just draws the eye, you know. Sure. Anyway, I gotta go do something, bye. He turned and quickly left Hagakure, Kaminari, and Minda behind. His heart was racing. Of course Hagakure has seen the notebook. She probably suspects I'm a pervert or something after all. Something about her whole demeanor had been weird, though. It was almost like she was luring him into saying that it wasn't true. Like she wanted to hear him say that. Why on earth would that be? And Kaminari and Minda ... even after he attempted to stick up for them a little, they went off insane like usual. Kodai and I aren't like that. Even if I'm not a worthless Deku anymore, I'm still an anxious bundle of nerves who has no chance with any girls, ever. And it's not like it matters. One for all is too much of a responsibility. I can't afford to fall in love. But the heart and the mind didn't always agree ... and while Izuku Midoriya's mind said he couldn't afford love ... the heart had already paid the price. Ryako Yanagi opened the door to Yui's room slowly, carefully. Yui, she asked in a soft tone. Are you alive in here? She stepped into the room and blinked. Yui was laying flat and stiff on her bed like a board, face down. In any other context, it would have been funny. Oh, Yui. Ryako stepped further into the room and sighed, closing the door behind her. What's got you acting like this on your birthday? Yui murmured something incomprehensible in response, muffled by her pillow. In any other scenario, Ryako would be the person she would be most happy to see, but as of right now she was in second place, and he wasn't coming. Ryako sat down on the side of the bed, moving the mattress upward a little. Yui fed and rolled over, looking up at her best friend. Her black hair splayed out around her head. The ghost girl was smiling down at her. You look sleepier than I am, she said, and that's saying something. Was it Itsuka and Takage? Yui nodded. I see they got you this nice bracelet, though. Ryako lifted up Yui's arm and inspected it. Are you concerned about how much money they spent on it? Yui blushed. She didn't like when people assumed she was concerned about something. It reminded her too much of old times. It made her suspicious that she wasn't keeping the facade up well enough. In any case, that wasn't it, so she shook her head. It was about Midoriya, she whispered. Oh, I see. Ryako already knew. She was the first and only person Yui had directly told about it. Did they try to convince you to go see him? Yui shrugged. The gray-haired girl tilted her head slightly in a knowing way. But you think that just because it's your birthday doesn't mean you have to suddenly be so bold about it. Yui pouted and lifted up her pillow, pressing it against her face from above. Ryako was so good at reading her somehow. Gently, the ghost girl pried the pillow off her face. I am not diminishing your feelings on the matter, but is that worth getting upset over? Or is there something else? A long pause. He doesn't know it's my birthday, Yui finally said, and he has no obligation to. I see. Your mind is filling with fantasies where he comes to you and says happy birthday, maybe even gives you a present, of his own volition. I can see why that would be frustrating. Ryako rubbed Yui's shoulder comfortingly, and then lifted up a box in her other hand. Well, I got you something, at least. Yui raised her eyebrows and sat up a little. The box wasn't wrapped, so she could see what it was plainly enough. Ryako grinned wider and handed her the box, which Yui took in both hands. I love seeing your eyes get all starry like that, the gray-haired girl said. Yep, it's an Ultraman box set, restored quality. I dug through your stuff to make sure you didn't have this one already. Hope you don't mind. Yui hugged the box close to her chest, closed her eyes, and smiled. Do you want to watch some now? She nodded. They were halfway through their third episode and eating cookie dough ice cream straight from the same carton when someone knocked on the door. Yui and Ryuko both exchanged a surprised glance, their faces illuminated by the blue light of Yui's small television screen. There was a bit of ice cream dripping off of Yui's lip. Ryuko giggled, lifted her finger and wiped it off for her. "Go get it, birthday girl." Yui walked over to the door. She suspected it would be one of the other girls and was kind of hoping they wouldn't ask to join in on what she and Ryuko were doing. Ryuko was into geek stuff, though not specifically Ultraman. However, that meant she knew how to be respectful of other people's weird interests. Pony or Setsuna would not be the same way. She opened the door on one Izuku Midoriya. For a moment, they stood apart, gaping at each other. Yui, for her part, was in complete shock. She knew her eyebrows must be a mile up in the air. Izuku was holding something in his hand. Hello, Kodai. Kendo let me on up. I have something I'd like to show you. Oh, is that Midoriya? Ryuko was standing up from behind. Inwardly, Yui winced. She wished she could take control of this embarrassing situation somehow. "Hello, Yanagi-san. What are you guys up to?" He peeked slightly into the room, the paused Ultraman episode clearly visible on the TV, as well as the carton of ice cream on the floor. "Just hanging out," Ryuko replied easily. Midoriya took stock of the environment, and then smiled a little as if he was amused. Yui felt like she might just wilt and die of embarrassment right then and there. "You wanted to show me something?" she asked in a low voice. Why yeah." He shot Ryuko another glance, as if over-aware of her presence, and then pulled none other than one of his famous notebooks out of his pocket. Yui's eyes widened. He held it out to her. "It's, your page is, marked. The page that has, quirk tips for you. I'm sort of trying to reach out to everyone, not to be presumptuous or anything. But of everyone in Class B, your notes are the most extensive, and he trailed off, face tilted down and extremely red, rocking back and forth on his heels. "This is one of your personal notebooks." Yui breathed. She knew one thing about Midoriya, he never showed anyone his notebooks. But here he was, giving one right to her. Slowly, heat spread up across her cheeks. Yeah, anyway. Take a look if you want, and I don't mean to presume or be a creep or anything, but I just thought you might find it interesting. And yeah, anyway, bye. Almost cartoonishly, he zipped off down the corridor. Yui and Ryuko both turned their heads to watch him go, their hair slightly flapping in a breeze he'd left behind. "I think he just activated his quirk a little bit," Ryuko said with a trace of humor. Then, she looked back down at the notebook. "Wow, he really just left that with you, huh? I thought he would just let us look at it and then take it back, but I guess waiting around here was too much for the guy." Yui was speechless. She backed into her room, letting Ryuko close the door behind them. She half fell backward onto her bed, and opened the book to the marked page. It was a near-immaculate drawing of her in her hero costume. While the costume itself was a little rough, her actual physical features were basically perfect. Perfect in every sense of the word. "Is this how he sees me? The girl in this drawing is so beautiful." Yui tore her eyes away from the drawing and looked at some of the notes. She read them in his nervous voice, which was funny in a cute way. "Yui Kodai. Quirk, size. Activated by pressing her fingertips together. I wonder if she's distantly related to your Raka-sen. It seems she can change the size of things at will, though, even without pressing her fingertips. Quirks that work in this way are rare and valuable. Any quirk that requires maintaining a mental connection to an inanimate object like that requires extreme focus. Of course, looking at how Kodai operates in the field, you wouldn't expect anything less. A methodical, cooperative, and strategic combatant. I've only ever seen her get taken out in situations where she is being countered or the raw power on the opposing side is simply too great. Especially works well with Yanagi, Shota, and Monoma. Potential team-ups, Uraraka, Shiro, Yaoyorozu. Here, the name Midoriya had been written and then erased, but traces of it could still be seen. The notes continued. Has extensive counterplay against the following notable villains: Mr. Compress, Gentle Criminal, Overhaul. Note on the drawing, hero costume needs work. I have seen her most often in casual or winter clothes. Costume itself appears to be some kind of reference to Ultraman or Tokusatsu in general. We'll have to ask. I hope that I can ask. Here, another line had been erased and replaced with this. Initial observations would suggest that Kodai's demeanor is not exactly perfect for rescuing civilians and putting them at ease, but you'd be mistaken to keep that opinion. When observed closely, Kodai is a thoughtful, nice, and caring girl who is as expressive as she needs to be. That is all to say ... She puts me at ease, at least. Yui, what does it say? Ryuko asked. Yui, he doesn't even know it, but he got me a wonderful birthday present. Yui pressed the open book against her chest, leaned back onto her bed, and let out a long, happy sigh. To Ryuko, it was the most in-love sound she had ever heard. Izuku's head was spinning. I'm such an idiot. I'm such an idiot. Why would I do that? Why would I just hand them the notebook in bolts? He'd never felt such intense dread outside of a villain situation in his life. Putting trust into two girls he barely knew. It wasn't like Kodai would go around sharing what she saw in there, but Ryuko Yanagi might be different. He didn't know all that much about her. And what if Yanagi somehow convinced Kodai that him giving them the notebook meant something? meant something that it hadn't. It had been a few hours now. It was almost time for dinner. Lunch Rush was making more food in the school cafeteria for all the students on campus at the same time, which included all the 2A and 2B students. The cafeteria, a prime place for things to spread. I'm not going to be able to handle this. Not at all. They were going to see. They were going to see all his notes on them and all his investigating and think that he was the biggest creep ever. What had he been thinking, going through with this idea? Had he even been thinking at all? I just really wanted to show her. Izuku blushed. He couldn't afford to be ridiculous. An old 1-2 mental punch went through his head, just like it always had when he was first getting to know Uraraka. I don't have time for love with one for all, and no girl wants a worthless Deku like me anyway. The sentence in all its forms was so ingrained in him that it was almost like a gut reaction. A deference, right? So he didn't want Kodai to get the wrong idea. And every second that notebook was with her, she might be getting the wrong idea. He took a step toward the doors, to possibly run back to the Class B dorm and get it back. But oh no, what would their reactions be if he showed back up, demanding it? They would be weirded out at his sudden change of mind. Or they might laugh at him for it. Or they might be so disgusted with the notebook that they'd shove it into him and slam the door, never speaking to him again. Or even if they liked the notebook, if he showed up now demanding it back, they'd just be disappointed. Nope, can't go tonight. I'm doomed no matter what I do. It would be absolute torture, waiting until the morning. He suspected he wouldn't get a wink of sleep. Why is this bothering me so much? No, Izuku, stupid, you're not allowed to question that after you got yourself into this situation in the first place. More on Deku. Midoriya. He looked up. It was Todoroki. His friend smiled. I thought we'd lost you. Not this time. Izuku chuckled weakly. Sue, Uraraka, and Ada were waiting just beyond. He followed them out the door and toward the cafeteria. It is very kind of Lunch Rush to make us all food during winter break, said Ada. We should make an effort to thank him personally. Yeah, Uraraka hummed, rubbing her belly. Especially since getting food for the dorm is so expensive, with 21 of us. I think he's gonna do it tomorrow night too. Ribbit, Sue put in. That's what I heard from a third year, anyway. Phew, I know. Uraraka said excitedly. We could all make a thank you card for Lunch Rush. Like, a big one with all our names on it. Class B's too. Izuku stiffened upon mention of Class B. Todoroki noticed. Are you sure you're all right? He asked in a deadpan expression. Fine, Izuku croaked. Tsuyu looked back at him. You're sounding a bit like me there, Midoriya-chan. Ribbit. I'm just hungry, he lied. Say a name, Uraraka drawled, pulling all attention back to her, to Izuku's relief. I feel like I could eat a horse. Todoroki's eyes widened in concern. An entire horse? He asked darkly, only for the two girls to laugh. It's a figure of speech, silly. Uraraka said, poking him in the belly. Oh, Todoroki muttered, rubbing the spot and averting his eyes. They walked into the cafeteria and joined the loud, chattering line. Izuku thought the cafeteria in general felt a little more crowded than normal. He supposed a lot of classes were missing people who'd gone home for winter break, although 2A and 2B were still full. However, even with those missing people, all the classes were in here at once, which never happened during school hours. They were always spread out over several lunch periods. It was also weird that the cafeteria windows showed darkness. He wasn't used to being here for dinner, and the slightly increased crowd level was furthering the unfamiliarity. He felt his palms begin to sweat as he pushed his tray along the metal ledge, picking up whatever food was left and robotically following his friends to their usual table. Their table was unoccupied, but a third-year class was sitting nearby, which was unusual. Hey, it's the problem kids, someone hooted. Izuku went pale. Ada frowned at them, but Uraraka just waved. Take a picture, it'll last longer. She called back, and all the boys sitting at that table laughed. You're amazing, Uraraka-san, Izuku sighed as the five of them sat down in sync, in their usual seats. Uraraka had a piece of fish halfway to her mouth, but she paused and blushed. Whatever do you mean by that, Deku-kun? Sue, meanwhile, was watching him intently. The way you can respond to stuff like that so quickly. I mean, in those kinds of situations, I just freeze up. Ah, Deku, it's no big deal. Uraraka waved a comforting hand and started to eat. Having a snappy comeback doesn't mean anything in life if you're no good at other stuff, like money, or your job, or, she trailed off, chewing. But that sort of thing will matter in our job, Izuku insisted. I can't become the best hero if I don't have good public relations, like All Might. Said Todoroki. I'm not so sure about that. After all, everyone claims that Bakugo and I are your closest competition for that role, and we're no better at that stuff than you, if not worse. A top three who are nervous, aloof, and angry respectively, said Sue flatly. The country's doomed. Why don't you just become the number one then? Sue, Izuku muttered. The kids would love it. Uraraka laughed and clapped her hands. See, Deku, she said with a smile. You can do funny comebacks and not even stutter. It's just that you're comfortable around us. Great. I'll be sure to keep that in mind and start deep lifelong friendships with every fan so I can get comfortable enough with them to speak properly. Midoriya, I wish you would not be so gloomy, Ada admonished. Also, you've barely touched your food. Did anything spur this on? Todoroki asked. Besides Uraraka's display, of course. Hey, I only asked because you seemed kind of down and spacey before we even got here. Apologies if I'm misreading the situation. Todoroki continued his level, neutral stare as he sipped up some noodles. I do well. Izuku scratched his neck. He thought about it, really thought about it. Then, he turned around to look out at the cafeteria. In the distance, about 50 yards and 7 tables away from them, Yui Kodai was sitting with the other girls from 2B. Yanagi was next to her. And to his horror the notebook was sitting there on their table. Between them. And it was open. He went pale. They were they were reading it. He could see their eyes moving across the page. And their expressions. They seemed curious. Inquisitive. Of course, that could mean anything. Especially with Kodai. And at this distance, it was so hard to tell. Midoriya, Ada asked, were you going to answer the question? Oh, right. He turned back to his friends. I mean, well todoroki. How did you, Izuku looked over to the table directly across from them, where Yaoyorozu was sitting with Jiro, Koda, and Takoyami. He leaned in closer. How did you know that you liked Yaoyorozu? Todoroki's eyebrows shot up. Oh, so that's what this is about. Uraraka whistled. Deku, do you think you might like someone? Who is it? Sue asked directly, bluntly. Todoroki gave them an annoyed glare. Let me answer his question first before you get all excited. Sorry, they both mumbled. Anyway, I think it was because I started getting really worried around her. Worried for her and worried about what she thought of me. I became over-aware of my behavior and demeanor at all times when around her. So, yeah. Ada sighed. Todoroki, I don't think that's very helpful for Midoriya. Why not? Because, Izuku finished for him. Because I get that way around everyone. He slumped over his tray and kept eating half-heartedly. Still, Uraraka said after a bit of an awkward silence. That doesn't mean you don't like this person. Clearly, your intuition was thinking it might be true. Come on, Deku, who is it? It's not. Sue looked at Uraraka with a somewhat nervous expression. It's not one of us, is it? Izuku shook his head honestly. Don't worry about that. The two girls exchanged another glance. Izuku would never know it, but both of them were more disappointed than concerned. That's a story for another time, though. Ida adjusted his glasses. I don't mean to intrude, but I confess I am a bit curious about this as well, Midoriya. Simply because you have never expressed any sort of opinion on the topic of romance before. Is it? Ashido. On that day in the snow, you did seem to be having quite a bit of fun with her. I can see how your differing personalities might complement each other. Or perhaps, in a similar vein. Hagakure. Izuku felt a shiver go up his spine. No to both, he answered, a bit quickly. Sue narrowed her eyes, as if she suspected he was lying. He noticed that. He looked up at her and said, no, really. I respect you enough to know that you aren't crushing on Yaoyorozu at the same time as me, Todoroki said. That leaves Jiro in our class. Buo, that'd be cute. Uraraka clapped her hands together dreamily. Oh, Deku, please tell me it's Jiro. Sorry to disappoint, Izuku said. It's not anyone in our class. It's U. He swallowed. I don't even think I like her, really. I mean, I do, but not like that. It's like I said before. I get that way around everyone, so it doesn't really mean much. It must be Kodai then, right? Sue asked. A long silence. Izuku had forgotten that they had all seen the two of them rolling around in the snow together that one time. Of course that got around. Kaminari probably told everyone who would listen. Yeah, he finally said, defeated. As of late, I've been thinking about her a lot and having similar thoughts to how Todoroki said he'd been with Yaoyorozu. I think I just want to be friends, though. He put in quickly at the end. Uraraka and Sue exchanged another glance. Well, Kodai really seems to enjoy your company. If what I saw is anything to go by, Uraraka said. She seems like quite an unapproachable girl, but perhaps she's just lonely. Ada suggested. I don't mean to psychoanalyze, but maybe it's another case like Todoroki here. That's true. Todoroki nodded. I didn't know it, but back then before you guys included me in your group, I really wanted friends. But Kodai does have friends, said Izuku. She's sitting with them right now. He nodded toward that lunch table. Sue blinked at him. You already knew where they were sitting. Were you looking for her earlier? Yes, but that's only because I gave her my Class B hero notebook for her to look at and she's over there reading it right now. He blurted. Silence. All four of them looked at each other, stunned. Izuku's heart pounded. He felt red spread over his cheeks. Dude, Todoroki muttered. You showed her a notebook. You've never even shown us your notebooks, said Uraraka. Ooh, yeah Izuku scratched his neck in panic. I was thinking it was kind of stupid for me to sit on all that information that some people might find helpful so I was thinking I would start showing people. And I guess I wanted to use Kodai as like a trial run. Using her. Sue clicked her teeth like a disappointed mother. That's a foul, ribbit. And no, not like that. He waved his hands around frantically. Deku, I think you need to be honest with yourself, said Uraraka. What do you mean? I am being perfectly honest with myself. It's not like I like Kodai. Even if I did, I have no time for romance with One for All, and no girl wants a worthless Deku like me anyway. The sentence flashed through his mind once again. Uraraka's face softened. You must trust Kodai a lot if you shared your notebook with her. But, I think in your anxiety after making the decision, You've forgotten that you trust her. You're letting bad what-ifs cloud your judgment. You've got to keep trusting her, Deku. From what I've seen. I mean, I haven't seen a lot, but I think she does care about you. And she wouldn't ... even if she did think it was weird. I think she would at least give it a chance. She's over there reading it, after all. Uraraka nodded toward the table in the distance. Ida laughed. Todoroki turned to look at him. What's so funny? It's just... Ida took his glasses off and wiped them on his jacket. It's just something I remembered just now. A strange coincidence. Izuku raised his eyebrows. I remember talking to Kendo about class birthdays at some point, Ida continued. During a representative meeting. It's just funny that we're talking about Kodai at such length, because if my memory is correct, I'm fairly certain her birthday is today. Izuku's heart stopped. All 4 pairs of eyes went to him at once. His lip trembled. He had never been so pale in his life. The back of his neck prickled, and that panicked, uncontrollable urge to bolt coursed through his body. I have to go to the bathroom, he squeaked, and ran for it, zooming out of the cafeteria at high speed. Oh no, Todoroki muttered. Ada seemed alarmed. What was that about? Ada, you big dummy, Uraraka admonished. If it's Kodai's birthday, and Izuku gave her his notebook, how do you think that's going to be interpreted? I didn't think about that. Of course you didn't, she scoffed. Then, she looked around at the other tables nervously. Luckily, it did not seem like anyone nearby had noticed Izuku's flight from the room. He's got it bad, Ribbit, said Tsuyu. Got what? Asked Ada. The crush on Kodai. I decided not to tell him, because the poor guy's already confused enough. But yeah, he's head over heels. Agreed, said Uraraka. The question is ... what can we do to help him? The Class B girls were walking back to the dorm from the cafeteria when someone finally noticed. Yui, Pony asked, what you got there? She pointed at the notebook, which Yui was hugging against her chest. Setsuna and Itsuka both turned to look, and Ryuko stepped in front of Yui protectively. It's nothing, she blurted quickly. You just made it worse, Yui thought, sighing inwardly. Ryuko's intentions were good, but it's not anything naughty, is it? Ibara asked in concern. Next to her, Kinoko snorted. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude, Pony half-whispered, backing away from Ryuko. Meanwhile, Yui felt a hand pull the notebook out from her hands. Pony's eyes widened as she noticed, and she gasped. Ryuko whirled. Hey, she protested. The hand returned to the end of Setsuna's arm, the notebook firmly grasped in her fingers. She grinned widely. Setsuna, that's rude. Ibara exclaimed, incredulous. You can't just use your quirk on the grounds like that. Itsuka added. Setsuna laughed them off. Relax, it's no big deal. Now, Yui, let's see what you've got to hide. She looked down at the front cover, which clearly said Hero Analysis number 21. Give it back, Yui growled. All the girls went silent. Setsuna looked up from the book to Yui, nervously. Boo, Yui, I really didn't mean to. Give it back, she repeated. No. Awkwardly, the lizard girl held the book out. Ryuko used her quirk to pull it away, from Setsuna's hands to Yui's. When it was returned to her, Yui hugged the book against her chest again protectively. How can she be so scary and so cute at the same time? They all thought to themselves. That's one of Midoriya's analysis notebooks, isn't it, Shroom? Kinoko asked. He's never shared those with anyone before. Exactly, said Itsuka, which is why Yui does not want anyone to see, as that would be a breach of his privacy. Unless. Itsuka raised an eyebrow. Yui, you didn't steal that or anything, did you? Yui shook her head. Setsuna grinned again. He must trust you a lot, huh? I don't know about that, she whispered. Ryuko shrugged casually, as if trying to alleviate the situation. He gave it to us, said he wanted to start sharing his notebooks around so people could get helpful quirk tips, then bolted. In that vein, it might be okay if we were to share it around ... He's got profiles on everyone in there, after all. Though since it's unclear, it's best to err on the side of caution. Agreed, Itsuka nodded. Unless you get explicit permission from Midoriya for anyone besides you two to see it, no one else should see it. It's the most respectful thing to do. Then again, Yui muttered, Ryuko wasn't even really supposed to see it. It was meant just for me. She clutched it more tightly against her chest. Setsuna gasped. Yui, did he know that it was your birthday after all? That sly dog. She shook her head. I don't think so. Still. Ryuko smiled enigmatically. Yui's profile is by far the most detailed of them. It's a notebook for just the people in our class. Kendo, Honuki, Shizaki, Tetsu, and Monoma all have a decent amount of detail, but nothing compared to hers. Itsuka blushed. He has details on me. Don't you blush, Yui thought fiercely. He's mine. Man, Pony complained. I know it's ... Intrusive. Kinoko suggested. Yes, Pony snapped her fingers. I know it's intrusive, but I really want to see what he's written for me. Is that bad? Ibara shuddered. Personally, I find the whole thing slightly unnerving. I suppose it makes sense that he would have more notes on me since I finished higher in the sports festival than the rest of you, but nevertheless I can't help but feel that he might have sinful intentions in what he's doing. Take it back, Yui interrupted her. Ibara froze and looked at her in terror. What? Take it back. Midoriya isn't like that. Alright, if you say so, Kodai-san. I suppose you know him be best. Setsuna and Ryuko shared an amused glance. Still, Kanoko drawled. It'd be nice to have a new perspective on my quirk, shroom. I feel like I've hit a skill wall with using it. Same, Pony agreed. There's only so much I can do with my horns. Midoriya seems so creative. I bet he's got ways of using our quirks we haven't even thought of. As the girls' conversation shifted just to talking about their quirks, Ryuko fell into step with Yui again at the back of the group. You okay? She whispered. Yui frowned. No, I know Setsuna can get to be too much sometimes. It's not that. Oh, Ryuko blinked. What is it, then? Yui nodded her head toward Ibara, who was now discussing something else with Itsuka. What Ibara said. Wait, what did she say? Ryuko scrunched up her face, remembering. Oh, she said that you know Midoriya best. And that's what's bothering you. Yui nodded. Because you don't think it's true. She guessed. Yui nodded again. I still don't feel like I know him well enough at all, she whispered. This feeling is so strong. I don't want to fall into it. Unprepared. Ryuko nodded. I know what you mean, she said seriously. Well, the best solution for that is to hang out with Midoriya more. Do you know what he likes to do? Yui shrugged miserably. Exercise. The ghost girl gasped and clapped her hands together. Yui, I have a great idea. You're gonna love it. Are you sure? Yui asked dryly. Yes. I checked the forecast for tomorrow. It's gonna be sunny and warmer than these past few days. A perfect morning for a nice, long run. Yui's eyes widened. The morning after the cafeteria dinner, Izuku was almost feeling good before he remembered that it was also the morning after Kodai's birthday. The morning after he'd accidentally handed her the journal. What if she thinks I intentionally gave it to her as a birthday present? That would mean that I asked someone when her birthday is, or did some kind of snooping ... That's so creepy. Added on top of the journal itself. There's no way she doesn't hate my guts. He was currently laid out on the common room couch, dressed in sweatpants and a sleep shirt. His arms hung limp off the side. No one was downstairs yet except for Yaoyorozu and Sato, who were making breakfast. They weren't paying him any attention, though. Izuku wondered what had transpired since he'd seen her and Yanagi leafing through the book in the cafeteria. Had they shared it with the rest of the girls in Class B? Or maybe even the whole class? Oh no, if that was true, then Monoma was sure to do something. It was over. It was all over. He groaned and looked up at the ceiling, blinking his dead eyes. Deku, what the fuck is up with you? Izuku tilted his head a little. Bakugo had come down the stairs and was now standing nearby, scowling at him. Kaken, I want to die. Really? Well, give me your quirk first, then. A long, awkward pause passed between them. Izuku looked over toward Yaoyorozu and Sato, bug-eyed. They weren't listening. That was a joke, you dillweed, Bakugo said after a moment. Still, you shouldn't even bring that up around people who don't know. Fuck off. You and all might sneak off from group exercises constantly and I'm the one who has to tell you to be more discreet. Anyway, you don't really want to die. Suck it up. You don't get it ... This isn't even related to hero stuff or anything. Bakugo laughed. As if. I've never seen you so dour about anything that wasn't hero related. Next you'll tell me it's about a fucking girl or something. Izuku blinked. Bakugo's humored grin slowly faded, as the silence ticked on, longer and longer. No way, he muttered, even more under his breath than he'd made the one-for-all joke. No fucking way that's what it is. Kaken. Nah, Deku, I'm out. Ask your ... Ask round face for advice on this kind of shit if you ask anyone. Bye. Hands in his pockets, Bakugo shuffled off out the door, presumably to go get some early morning exercise in. Izuku sighed and leaned back. I should go, too. All the snow's melted off and the sun's out. Still pretty crisp, but altogether a brilliant morning. Maybe that will lift my spirits. But it was only delaying the inevitable, wasn't it? One way or another, he would have to face Kodai again. He remained on the sofa as more of his classmates came down for the morning. Happy discussion, greetings, plans for the day all around. The sound of clinking plates and glasses echoed around the room as people ate breakfast. A shout of "Zero, come help clean up," and then laughter. Izuku kept staring at the ceiling through all of it. No one came over to see what was wrong, until, Midoriya, is everything okay? He looked up. It was Hagakure again. He obviously couldn't tell from her face, but her voice sounded very concerned. You've been laying over here for a while, she said. Did something happen? Who ... Well, yes, Izuku answered, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. But it's nothing you should concern yourself with, Hagakure. I'll be fine. But I'm worried about you, she said. It almost sounded like she was pouting. Is it something to do with your notebook? His eyes widened. How'd you know? There was a knock on the common room door. Everyone downstairs turned to look in surprise. Not a lot of people who would ever come to the class building would actually bother to knock on the door. Besides, their form was clearly visible through the glass. It was Kodai. Izuku's heart stopped. He felt such a strong grip of terror that his feet almost fled him up the stairs. The only thing that kept him in place was that Hagakure was in his way, and he didn't want to knock her over. Yaoyorozu furrowed her brow and walked over to the door to open it for Kodai. When it opened, Izuku got a clearer look at what Kodai was wearing. A red and white running jacket, the same pattern and colors as her hero costume, and a pair of black yoga pants. Her hair was also up in a ponytail, which he had never seen before. A blush spread across his face, adding to the panic. Kodai, what are you doing here? Momo asked her. Have you business with us? Yui gave the other black-haired girl a dead stare. I'm going running today, she said. I see. Yaoyorozu pressed her hands together, looking the other girl up and down. And Yui's head turned, and her gaze fixed straight upon Izuku. He froze up like a deer in headlights. Kodai pointed. He's coming with me. All eyes went to Izuku. He opened and closed his mouth, sputtering. His cheeks had never felt so hot. I am. He stammered. Kodai nodded. Oh god, she wants to talk to me about the notebook personally to tell me to stop being a creep and leave her alone. But she's nice enough to not do it in front of everyone, so she's using this as an excuse. She really was too nice. He didn't deserve that, did he? Momo looked sternly at Izuku, hands on her hips. Well, Midoriya, are you going to keep her waiting, or what? Well, I mean, we didn't. You didn't plan this. Hagakure finished for him helpfully. Yeah. Hagakure seemed to be looking back and forth between him and Yui a lot. Well, you can't possibly expect him to come along if you just spring it on him like that. Suddenly, Ashido sprang up from behind the invisible girl, got one hand around her chest to keep her still, and planted her other palm over where the girl's mouth was to keep her quiet. She grinned widely and evilly, and then looked back at Kodai. Don't worry, Kodai-chan. Midori's coming, isn't he? She looked back at Izuku expectantly. Well, Izuku couldn't tear his eyes away from Yui's. She was just continuing to stare at him with a dead expression. You're already dressed to run anyway, dude, Shiro said. Kirishima and Sato hummed in agreement. Yeah, robotically. Izuku shuffled over toward the door, passing a few of his classmates on the way. His eyes were wide in terror, but he kept a nervous smile fixed on his face. He passed the threshold, took one step down the stairs, and then turned back around to look at Yaoyorozu again. Well, have fun, she told the two of them, and closed the door on them. Toru wrenched herself from Mina's iron grasp, panting. Mina, she growled. Why did you do that? She knew she was letting some of her obsession creep out. Just a little ... but these were desperate times, and it called for it. Why? Because they're so cute together. Mina gushed. She likes him for sure. I know it's impossible to tell what she's thinking, but I can just feel it. And he ... Well, Midori's a bit of a doorknob when it comes to this stuff, but I'm sure he'll come around with a bit of push and shove, and that's exactly what I just did. Yeah, but... Toru cut herself off, frustrated. The irony with Mina's supposed love expertise is that she had never quite figured out who her best friend, Toru, was really attracted to, and that was by Toru's design. It would not do to ruin that carefully crafted shield of deception now. But ... he just seemed kind of uncomfortable. Of course he did. He always looks like that at first, but he's the type who starts enjoying himself really quickly. Of course, I know that. That's why this is so dangerous. Her window of opportunity was slipping away. If only she'd had a little bit more time to talk to him before Kodai had shown up. A moment of absolute bad luck. I have to make a plan. A plan of action, to enact immediately as soon as it's ready. What's going on? Uraraka asked, yawning. She and Tsuyu were just coming down the stairs. Another thing, Toru had counted on talking to Izuku without the two of them around, because they were the biggest two threats besides Kodai. The rest of the common room was busy with activity, so Mina perked up and answered, I just sent Midori out for the time of his life. Uraraka and Tsuyu both stared in surprise, shared a glance, and then looked back at Mina. Was it... with Yui Kodai? She hadn't said anything yet. Why wasn't she talking? Come on, say anything, Yui Kodai told herself. All they'd done was start walking toward the running trails, which were a short distance away from the class dorm. Izuku was following her silently, but he seemed absolutely terrified. Of course he was. He didn't know what she thought of the notebook. He was worried. I have to let him know that I like it without freaking him out even more. And that wasn't even all she wanted to do. The plan was eventually to get over that barrier of awkwardness and learn even more about him. She wanted to get comfortable enough with him to laugh and talk casually and just ... feel at ease. She wanted that very much. And none of that would be accomplished today if she just kept up this silence. As it turned out, Izuku was the one who broke it. And a nice day, isn't it? He stammered, his eyes darting toward the sky. And anywhere but her. Yui nodded, then cringed inwardly. Don't just nod. Respond verbally. Speak. Yes, she said with a paradoxically calm voice that she did not feel on the inside at all. I like the sun, though I'm a bit disappointed that all the snow melted. Wow, that was a lot. A whole sentence. Way to go, Yui. What if he thinks you're weird? As she feared, he was now staring at her, dumbfounded for a moment. Then, that nervous grin returned, and he averted his eyes, scratching the back of his neck. Well, could always be more SS snow. Maybe www. He stopped, closed his eyes hard, and took a deep breath. Yui tilted her head at him, confused. Maybe we'll get some more for Christmas, he finally said, not stuttering at all. He ... he was trying to talk without stuttering. Yui smiled at him, lifting up her lips as far as she was used to. Maybe so, she half-whispered. It seemed to her that Izuku's own smile seemed a little less fake, too. A little less nervous. And was she crazy, or was the sun a little brighter? They made it to the head of the running trails. So, he spoke up again, taking a deep breath. Do you come running often? Yui shook her head, cringed inwardly again, and said out loud, not as often as I'd like to. We're breaking the barrier. Slowly, surely, we're breaking it. Keep going. Right. Well. To be honest. Same. He was still looking away from her, and he was still forcing his words out slowly to prevent stuttering. I always shorthand myself with cardio, I guess. I get really focused on just lifting weights sometimes. Progress. Yes. Yui smiled a little. I think. Most people have the opposite problem. Or don't exercise at all. So you're doing better than most. Midoriya. Izuku stared at her for a long moment, that shocked expression on his face again. She could practically see the gears turning in his head. Kodai. She raised her eyebrows. Yes, you're not. Mad at me. Or, creeped out, or anything. The last piece of barrier, and the hardest to break. If we want to keep moving forward, this must be acknowledged. And if he's gonna be brave enough to ask, I have to be brave enough to answer. And she had to answer completely, with as many specific words as possible, to ensure that he didn't doubt a thing. Izuku. Midoriya, I'm not mad at you or creeped out. If you're asking about the notebook specifically, then I'll have you know that I actually quite liked it. And if you're talking about anything else, I can't remember it, which means it didn't creep me out or make me mad either. I invited you on this run because I wanted to go on a run with you. She took a long gasping breath when she was done, the effort of saying so much causing her to sway with fatigue. She didn't think she'd let out so many words at once since Seiya. And now, she looked expectantly at Izuku. His mouth was opening and closing, his eyes widened in complete surprise. 4 seconds. 5, 6, 7. Then, his face finally relaxed. His shoulders lowered. Thanks, Kodai. I'm kind of relieved. Kodai nodded, acknowledging what he said, and then turned back to look at the trail before them. Izuku was in awe at how much she'd just said to him. He couldn't believe it. He had even more trouble believing the actual words she said, but it's like Uraraka said. I have to trust her, too. Kodai lowered herself to the ground and began to stretch. Right, stretching. That was what you were supposed to do before a run. Izuku copied her movements, lowering himself and putting his legs out straight on the ground, leaning forward and touching his toes. He wondered why she wasn't talking now. Perhaps that speech had been tough on her. Could she only use so many words in a certain span of time, like she was refilling a tank? That was cute, and sort of funny. He looked over at her, concentrating on her stretches, and smiled in admiration without realizing it. She noticed him looking, tilted her head up, and smiled back. He blushed, realizing he'd been caught, and then Kodai nodded at his legs, as if telling him to keep stretching. He did so, a bit bashfully. Well, if she was a bit tired of talking, then he'd fill in the gaps. It was the respectful, gentlemanly thing to do. Crocheted anything interesting recently? He asked. Her eyes widened a bit, as if she was surprised he remembered that, and then she shook her head, and moved on to a different stretch. I see. He copied her movement. Well, you seem awfully good at this stretching thing. Even when I do go for runs, I often take this stuff for granted. She clicked her teeth and shook her head at him, almost playfully. Izuku's smile widened. Who knew she had so much personality? Did anyone know? Yanagi, probably. But this felt like she was showing it just for him, and that made his heart flutter. A few more minutes of stretching. Kodai stood up and bent down, touching her toes while in a standing position. Izuku's eyes flicked down to her rear, and then quickly darted away. Wait, what am I thinking? I can't see her like that. I don't. He coughed, his ears turning red, and asked, is that everything? She stood back up straight, her ponytail flipping. She answered, and turned back to look at the trail. Let's go. She began a jog, and Izuku followed, matching pace to come up next to her. It was a bit harder to talk with them bouncing up and down while running. No, don't think about the word bounce. His eyes threatened to stray down toward her chest. Instead, he focused on her ponytail, which was flipping around in the wind. I've never seen you with your hair up, he commented randomly. Yui raised an eyebrow. I suppose you haven't, she said, apparently fine with talking again now. It suits you. She lagged behind him for a second, as if missing a running step. Then, her lips turned up a little. Thanks, she said, more quietly. Maybe I'll do it more often. Itsuka might complain that I'm stealing her look, though. Izuku laughed at that. It wasn't his nervous laughter, either. A genuine laugh had escaped him. Say, you're pretty close with her, huh? I guess. Kodai had a thoughtful expression for a moment. But I didn't show her the notebook or anything, if you were wondering that. No one has seen but Yanagi and me. That was a whole new relief. Of course she didn't show anyone else, stupid Deku. She's better than that. Trust her. Trust her. Well, still. I'm sorry for springing it on you like that and just running off. Don't be sorry. Would you? Yui paused for a moment, and seemed a bit more down. Would you like it back? I can go get it after this if you want. No, that's okay. Keep it as long as you like. He blurted. Wait, I mean as long as you want to, of course. Damn it, she seemed so sad that I just. Yui giggled. We can talk about something else other than the notebook if you want. Okay. What to talk about, though? I can't think of anything. His brain stirred. He'd already asked her about crocheting. What else was there? He'd seen. He'd seen Ultraman on her television in her room. Her and Yanagi had been watching it. There is something I've been meaning to ask, actually. She raised her eyebrows. Are you ... is your costume? I mean ... oh, you probably saw this in the notebook, since I mentioned it ... is your costume inspired by Ultraman? This time, when Yui smiled, she almost showed teeth. It was easily the brightest and most genuine expression he'd seen from her. Yes, she answered. Are you ... are you a fan of it? The question was paradoxically timid. Izuku nodded. When I was younger, I went through a phase of pre-Quark era superhero media. Ultraman was one of those things. It's been a few years since I was really into it, but... He paused for a moment, looking straight at Yui as they ran. Her blue eyes were shimmering with hope and expectation. He chuckled a little nervously and continued. But, actually the show inspired me a lot. Most of my hero costume ideas were, very inspired by All Might. But because of Ultraman, I had this phase where I designed some other stuff. Based on Tolnarita's original theory of monster design that he used for the original Ultraman show. I just thought his 3 rules of design were really interesting. Don't just make monsters ghosts with extra heads or limbs, don't. Just make them animals, and don't give them exposed body parts. Yui finished for him. Narita-san was a genius. He's the reason a lot of those monsters are so unique looking and aren't just Godzilla ripoffs. Yes, Izuku gushed. Exactly. Of course, I eventually just settled back into copying All Might, so I don't know if Narita's ideals really rubbed off on me properly. Yui laughed as they turned a corner of the trail. Midoriya, these monster designs of yours ... are they in a notebook? Yes, an older one. I still have it, Actually, it might be at my house and not at the dorm. But, her blue eyes were still filled with bright hope. Could I look at that too sometime? Izuku took a deep breath. For a moment, there was a pure panic in his mind. Back at Aldera, quite a few girls had tricked him with similar setups, trying to get him to display his notebooks and look like a total idiot. Was that what Yui was doing? Lying to him about the first notebook to put him in a sense of ease, and then go double or nothing? There's no way she could like me after all. I'm just a worthless Deku. Uraraka's voice again. Trust her. Of course, Kodai. His answer came out a little hesitant and strained, but he'd answered. Yui had noticed. He still doesn't trust me fully. Of course it wouldn't be that easy. Even though this had gone so well so far, she couldn't expect for him to be aware of her romantically that quickly. It would take much more time. Of course, now that they'd had that conversation about Ultraman ... she knew it was worth it. Izuku Midoriya, not only do I like you, but I think you might be perfect. Oh, how I can't wait to make you aware of what you're doing to me. It's tantalizing. But she would have to keep working at it. Midoriya, would you like to run with me again? If there's another day like this. All right, he answered. Sure, she smiled. I'm glad. Oh, by the way, Kodai. I didn't know until late last night, but happy birthday. She forced her head down, knowing that heat was rushing up through her face. Thank you, she breathed. Meanwhile, from the bushes, Nido Monoma watched them run past. And he stewed with fury. This cannot continue. An absolute disgrace on all fronts. Izuku Midoriya, I'll make you regret this. Izuku was laying on his bed thinking about Yui when he realized his phone was blowing up. This never happened unless something was going on in one of his 2 group chats. The main class one, or the one with Ida, Uraraka, Tsu, and Todoroki. In this case, the first message that he saw appear was something from Yaoyorozu, meaning it was the former. Yaoyorozu, we need to go out and buy some more things for the Christmas party. Any volunteers? Takoyami, I can go. Gyro, sure. Kirishima, alright. What do we need? Yaoyorozu, green things. Wreaths and garland. Shoji, is that really necessary? The common room seems pretty decorated as it is. Ashido, just because you're a minimalist. We want to overdecorate. Kaminari, why don't you just make that stuff yourself? Yaomomo. Wreaths and garland are always plastic anyway. Yaoyorozu, no, we need to support the local economy. Gyro, are you really that lazy? Kaminari. Gyro, Christmas is still like 4 days away, we have plenty of time. Yaoyorozu, also, we need a proper Christmas tree. There is a farm out in Hakioji. Ajiro, that's pretty far, and we can't take a tree on the train. Yaoyorozu, that's why I've recruited Itsuka Fro. Ashido, boop. Yaoyorozu, that's why I recruited Kendo. She has a motorcycle license and can strap a small to medium-sized tree to the back of her bike. Ashido, nice save. Kirishima, Hakioji is far but I can go if you need. Midoriya, I'll go as well. Hagakure, me too. Yaoyorozu, okay, that should be enough. Kirishima and Midoriya can do the heavy lifting and Hagakure can actually pick the tree. Kirishima, hey, what's that supposed to mean? Gyro, she's saying that you boys would just pick the first one you come across and be done with it. Ashido, you don't understand the nuance to shopping for a good product. Hagakure, don't underestimate Midoriya-kun. Hagakure, taking care of that mess of green hair probably means he'd be good at buying plants. Midoriya, seems like a stretch. I will do my best though. Yaoyorozu, you 3 take the train. Kendo will meet you there on her bike. As for the other things, Gyro and Takoyami. Gyro, crystal clear doll face. Takoyami, roger that. Kirishima, why not ask Kodai from Class B? I feel bad for making Kendo ride across the city by herself. If we ask Kodai, she can just take the train with us and shrink the tree, then grow it again when we get back. Hagakure, no. Yaoyorozu, Kendo has already agreed to it. Don't worry about her. Midoriya, Kodai-sen's quirk does not work on living things. Anyway, Ashido, Hagakure, what's that about? Kaminari, oh no. Gyro, OMG, I hate y'all. Gyro, leave the poor boy alone. Minta, hey, what did I miss? Yaoyorozu, nothing. Go away. Minto, D. Achako and Sue were playing cards on the floor in the common room, while Ida made himself a chicken salad sandwich at the counter. Hey, does the dorm seem empty to you today? Achako asked Sue. Sue shrugged. Maybe some people went home to see their families today, Ribbit. Ida shook his head. No, a bunch of people went out to run errands for the Christmas party. Do you two not check your phones? Oh whoops, Ribbit. I haven't checked mine. Mine's been dead for almost 24 hours. Achako half-whispered dramatically. Ada's eye twitched. You ... what? Why? Because it ran out of power. Then ... why don't you charge it? Because my plan charges me by hours of usage. It can stay dead for just a little longer. I did text my parents right before it happened anyway, so. You're Raka-san. Go charge your phone. Ada deadpanned at her. Uraraka rolled her eyes. After we finish this game. Suyu, meanwhile, was scrolling through hers. Oh, she exclaimed, and then looked up at Ida. Midoriya-kun went to pick up the Christmas tree. Yes, I believe Kirishima and Hagakure went with him. And Kendo as well, apparently. Ribbit. Suyu blinked at Uraraka, whose eyes widened. Midoriya and Kendo both off campus. That would give them a chance to execute their plan. There was only the Takage issue ... but she was just one issue compared to 3. Ida saw the looks in their eyes. Oh, no. You know that Todoroki and I don't approve of that idea. On a class rep level. On a friend level. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes, exasperated. You two cannot just kidnap Kodai. Sure we can, Ribbit. We only want to talk to her, Uraraka grumbled. Well, she probably doesn't want to talk to you. If Midoriya and Kodai have something going on, then they deserve the privacy to work it out themselves. Or are you two as bad as Ashido now? We just don't want Deku to get hurt. This veers into dangerous territory. Tension between our classes is already somewhat up since the snowball incident. Midoriya and Kodai are both class cinnamon rolls, Ribbit. Suyu put a finger to her chin. I feel like if they get together, then tensions might dissipate. But it sounds like you're trying to scare her off from him. Ida pointed out. Achako waved her hand. Nah, we just want to talk is all. Make sure her intentions are good. She's a hard person to get a read on. For all we know, she could a manipulative, conniving, evil bi. She cut herself off. Both Ada and Suyu were staring at her. You've got that scary look in your eye again, Ribbit. Uraraka-san, have you ever thought you might be a little overprotective? Deku deserves it, she said, defensively. He's always overprotective of everyone else. He deserves someone who is that way toward him. I want to make sure that Kodai can be that person, too. The train ride was long and somewhat awkward. Izuku sat between Kirishima and Hagakure. The red-haired boy was dressed in his school uniform, as was Izuku himself, but Hagakure was in a flowery blouse and tight jeans. It was easy to notice her clothes, since there was nothing else to notice. Hagakure, I like your outfit, Izuku said, just to fill the silence. She made a small sound of surprise and appeared to turn and look at him. Thank you, Midoriya. Kirishima leaned around Izuku, an inquisitive expression on his face. And then, he grinned. Oh yeah, it is cool. Though ... why dress up to go get a Christmas tree? Maybe you like me or Midoriya. His voice was teasing as he elbowed Izuku in the side lightly. Midoriya blushed at the thought, romance having already been on his mind. I wish I had Kodai's phone number. Kirishima, see, come on. Sometimes girls just like to look and nice. He felt Hagakure pat his arm lightly. You sweetheart. He's right, Kirishima. I just like to dress up when I go out, because ... you know ... not really gonna get noticed otherwise. Kirishima nodded, straightforward as ever. I understand. But it seems it worked, since Midoriya of all people spoke up about it. Toru teased, tugging on his sleeve. It seems like you've been more confident recently, you know. Ooh, well ... it is strange. He looked straight ahead, at the windows on the other side of the train, the outer areas of Tokyo rushing by. I can't imagine a scenario where I would ... want to be noticed in public, like that. Outside of hero work, I mean. And yet you always seem to pull attention wherever you go, said Hagakure. You're like the center of everything. Me, I guess I'd like to be paid more attention, but I can't. I guess we both want what we can't have, haha. She trailed off. She seemed to be looking away from him, so Izuku gazed for a long time at the spot where her head was supposed to be. He felt ... sad. I wish I could see her face. How does she feel right now? He found himself comparing her to Yui in his head. They were both very hard to get a read on, but for slightly different reasons. And that ignited a spark of curiosity inside him, different from the one that ignited for things like quirks and heroes, but definitely ... I in conjunction with it. Oh no, do I have a type? Do I have a thing for mystery? Ah, don't mope around so much, you two, said Kirishima. You're both awesome. You're two of the brightest people in the class. Thanks, Kirishima, they both said at the same time in similar resigned tones. Izuku turned a bit sharply to look at her in alarm at their synchronization, and she appeared to do the same thing. Then, she started giggling. Haha. Izuku laughed a little, too. He'd never really been that comfortable around Hagakure before, especially recently, but maybe that was changing. A few minutes later, more people crowded onto the train, and the three of them were somewhat squished together. A somewhat smelly older man sat down on the other side of Hagakure, and she scooted herself into Izuku a little, clinging onto his arm. Her head slightly leaned onto the flat of his shoulder. She's warm, Izuku thought, gulping. His heart skipped a beat. He'd never thought about Toru in this context before. Do you mind? She muttered, breathing into his ear. She sounded nervous about the crowd. No, it's fine. The swell of her chest was just barely brushing against his elbow, and he was very aware of it. What are you thinking, Izuku? You can't think that way about her. You can't even afford to think that way about Yui. You have a responsibility with One for All, remember. And it's not like they would ever return such feelings. I wonder where Izuku is, Yui thought as she walked alone along a campus path. The temperature had dropped a bit since their perfect morning run, so she was wearing a sweater and hugging her chest a little. I wish I could be walking with him right now. I wish I had his phone number or something. Earlier, Monoma had pulled her aside and asked her some strange questions. None of them had directly mentioned Izuku, but it had seemed like they were related. Stuff like how have you been feeling recently and any distractions. If Monoma was planning something, there would be hell to pay. Though maybe she was just suspicious of his questioning being related to Izuku because she couldn't stop thinking about Izuku in general. That also might be it. A bush rustled behind her. Yui turned slowly, one eyebrow raised. No one was around. Probably just a squirrel. Then she saw movement out of the corner of her eye, and Sui's tongue wrapped around her midriff. Yui let out a small squeaking yelp, as Ochako Uraraka leapt from the bushes and put her arms around her shoulders. The brunette whispered in her ear, one touch from me and you float away. Don't think of doing any funny business. Yui coughed. I think the only funny business happening right now is from you. Sui retracted her tongue and crept up to them slowly, arms folded into a frog position. We just want to talk, Kodai. And I think you know what about, Ribbit. Midoriya-kun. Yui whispered. Do you both like him too? Her heart sank. He was much closer with Sue or Uraraka than he was with her, right? If they wanted to pursue him, they could snatch him up so much more easily. The two classic girls shared an uncomfortable glance. No, but we do want to talk about him, Ribbit. Yui stared at Suyu for a long time, then at Uraraka. Finally she nodded. Okay, please remove your hands. Uraraka stepped back, seeming a bit more sheepish. Sorry. She followed the two of them into the class dorm, which seemed to be very empty today. Yui looked around curiously, which Suyu caught notice of. He's not here right now, Ribbit. He went with Kirishima and Hagakure to buy a Christmas tree. Kirishima and Hagakure. A boy and a girl. At least it's not just the girl. Or two girls. Yui winced inwardly. They went to a room that Yui assumed to be Uraraka's, because the temperature inside was very cool from multiple electric fans. She didn't imagine Suyu would want to keep her room cold like this. Uraraka turned around and sat down on her bed. Yui took a seat in the desk chair, while Suyu remained standing. So, Uraraka began, crossing her arms. What are your intentions with our friend? Yui almost snorted. It was sort of funny, like these two were his overprotective mothers or something. I bet he really does have an overprotective mother. He seems like the type. She began softly. I think I like him. I suppose. You're gonna have to be more confident than that, Ribbit. If you plan on leading him on. She shook her head insistently. No. How much time have you spent with him? Uraraka asked. Besides that run, which, I don't know. To us, this seems sort of out of nowhere. Pardon us for being suspicious, but Monoma has hatched plots like this before against our class. I would never work with him, Yui hissed, letting her anger rise a little. Not with something like this. Then, how? Suyu put a finger to her chin. How did you and Midoriya-chan even get close? Yui paused for a moment, looking at her shoes. Then, she smiled faintly. We were roof buddies, she replied enigmatically. Sue and Uraraka exchanged a glance. So, you really do like him, Ribbit. Yui nodded. And you want to spend more time with him. Another nod. She lifted her head up a hair. Does this mean ... he told them he likes me. Does he like me back? Did ... he ... she squeaked, unable to fully ask the question. Suyu seemed to understand. She shook her head. He hasn't told us anything. He seems to want to keep whatever connection the two of you have private, even from us. Her heart went out to him in that moment. He was always so considerate. But at the same time ... if he hadn't said anything explicitly to them, then, did he really like her back? If Uraraka began carefully, gazing at Yui's face with deductive eyes. If you're having doubts, well, I don't think you should. Just between us, I think he does feel something for you. Though with Deku, it's ... hard to tell. He has that general puppy love for everyone. Yui's shoulders slumped. He also doesn't ever consider his own feelings, Ribbit, said Tsuyu. Hardly ever. He'll defend everyone around him to his last breath, but he won't even think about himself. Just like how I was with Seiya. Yui had wondered many times how Izuku could seemingly lack so much confidence when he was also such an amazing hero, but now she understood. She'd heard some of his past with Bakugo, and had comprehended what that meant well enough. Did his friends know, though? Maybe they knew as much as she did, or even more, but had failed to understand. Because they hadn't gone through similar experiences. They didn't wear a mask. It has to be me, then. Yui drew herself up, taking a deep breath. He needs someone to defend him. Someone to make him be a little selfish sometimes. That's what I want to be. And I want the same things from him, too. I want to have a relationship that isn't just one-sided. She had no idea if that had made any sense. It was so hard for her to put things into words these days. But Tsuyu and Uraraka both grinned. That's a relief, Uraraka said. I'm rooting for you, Ribbit. I hope things work out. Even if you guys just stay friends, because you might not be ready for a relationship, Ribbit. But you both seem really happy around each other, so. Yui nodded, and stood up to leave. Thank you both, she breathed quietly as she backed out of the room. Toru awoke to Midoriya shaking her gently. Hagakure, we're here. Huh, why? She stirred, getting up off his shoulder. Wait, his shoulder. She sat up much more sharply, looking at him in alarm. His face was sheepish and a little red. Sorry, should I have woken you before? You just seem so peaceful. No, she protested, a little too quickly. He let me fall asleep on him. Her heart was fluttering. No, it's fine. Don't worry about it. She put a little pep in her speech to make sure he understood she really didn't mind. Well, alright then. Midoriya stood, along with Kirishima, and they moved to the doors. Toru followed, watching Midoriya's broad form step out of the train. No, I do not mind at all. It had been a very pleasant nap. The Christmas tree farm was just a short walk from this particular Hakioji train station. A brown, earthy space occupying a hillside. The trees were set up in lines. They were of varying heights and widths, and Toru remembered her actual job here. Immediately she began scanning to find what the ideal tree would be for both Kendo to take back, and to set up in their common room. Wow, cool, Kirishima exclaimed, pointing. There's so many. The guy running the farm hailed them at the entrance, and immediately began promoting the nearest trees to Kirishima, who swallowed the bait, and entered conversation with him. Toru tugged on Midoriya's sleeve. Come on. He turned to look at her in surprise. While Kirishima's distracting the salesman, we can make an actual choice. Let's go. Oh, all right. His cheeks were faintly red, but he allowed Toru to drag him away. She had to resist the urge to take his hand. Quite not that time yet. She scanned the trees around them. We should get something kinda short, right? The ceiling in the common room is pretty tall, but Kendo will have a hard time strapping a taller tree to her motorcycle. We also should get one that has evenly divided branches, Midoriya suggested, so we can decorate it nice and evenly. Kuo, look at you being all logical. Toru poked him in his firm chest. I didn't even think about that. Maybe the girls were wrong about you after all. Well, I just do what I can, I suppose. He looked away from her and scratched his neck. After another minute or two of silent browsing, interrupted by one time of Midoriya pointing a tree out, and Toru shooting it down, she decided to ask him something. Did you celebrate Christmas at home, Midoriya-kun? Sort of. He shrugged. My mother and I got presents for each other. She would buy All Might merch for me and I'd get her some home ec supplies or a mug or something like that. We would make apple cider or some other special holiday thing and enjoy that, but we never got a tree or anything. Or put up any decorations at all, really. So is it just you and your mom at home? Toru asked, a somewhat sad tone in her voice. Yeah. My dad works overseas. And I have no siblings. Me neither. Only child gang. She lifted up her fist, which caused Midoriya to look at the sleeve of her blouse blankly. It's a fist bump, she explained. Right. Sorry. He fist bumped her. So you're an only child, then. I guess it would be difficult for your parents to have a bunch of invisible kids running around. Well. Toru turned a corner, leading him along with her. Who knows if they would have gotten a quirk like mine. What are your parents' quirks? He blurted. If you don't mind me asking. It's fine. She chirped, though this was a sore spot for her. Still, he's curious about me. He's making conversation. My dad can make himself visible and invisible at will. My mom has an energy quirk that lets her stay awake for her entire life. What? Izuku's eyes widened. She doesn't have to sleep. Nope, never does. She has 3 jobs. Can she sleep if she wants to? Toru shrugged. I guess not. I've never seen her sleeping. That is very interesting. Imagine how much you could do with your life. He muttered. Sorry, I should probably stop myself before I get to rambling. That's okay. So I guess you didn't really inherit any part of your mom's quirk. Just your dad's. Yeah, except I can't turn mine off. Oh, did you did you always have it? Did it manifest right as you were born, or? Toru swallowed. She didn't want to make things uncomfortable, but if he was asking. No, I got it when I was 5. I was visible before that. And before you ask, I have normal black hair. It's probably a real mess at this point. I see. Izuku turned red again. Sorry, I'm probably asking questions that you hear all the time. It really is fine, Midoriya-kun. The more educated people are on what it's like to be me, the better. That way they don't make any false assumptions. What about your parents? What are their quirks? Oh, my mom has telekinesis and my dad can breathe fire. Strange and stranger. How did that become super strength? Your grandparents or something. The doctors think that my super strength is some kind of tactile telekinesis, a violent mutation of my mom's. Oh, I see. Though Tora really kinda didn't. Midoriya was such a weird case. She also got the feeling that he might be lying to her about something. She wasn't sure what detail the lie was, but it frustrated her. And I suppose you've told Kodai the whole truth, is that it? She stopped in front of a tree. Let's take this one. Itsuka Kendo pulled up to the tree farm and revved her bike. The 3 class of students were walking up to her, Kirishima and Midoriya carrying the tree together while Hagakure waved at the farmer behind them. Hey, Kendo. Kirishima waved. Nice bike. Thank you. She replied politely. Kirishima was a cool guy, though a bit over-enthusiastic. Say, does Class B need a tree? It feels weird that you're Class Pres but you're helping us out. Kirishima frowned as he helped Midoriya load it onto her bike. We have a reusable plastic one from last year, Itsuka told him. I guess Momo prefers the natural kind, though. They can be a mess, said Kirishima. Oh well. VP's orders. Meanwhile, Midoriya and Hagakure were talking about something. The invisible girl giggled and shoved herself into the boy's arm in a playful way. He seemed to respond well to it, laughing back and only going a little red. Itsuka raised an eyebrow. What's with them? She whispered to Kirishima. Oh, not sure. I don't think they were ever close before. Honestly, it's like I've been third-wheeling this whole time. Kirishima laughed, as if it didn't matter at all, and then walked over to finish strapping down the tree. Itsuka continued to watch Midoriya. Since when was he so close with Hagakure? How long has this been going on? Does Yui know? Should I even tell her? Had she gotten the wrong idea about Midoriya the whole time? Was he some kind of ass that led a bunch of girls on at once? No, that seems unlikely. Kendo shook her head, as if banishing the thoughts, and climbed back onto her bike. Whatever the case, she felt uneasy. Like there was some kind of disastrous drama on the horizon. And I'll probably have to help dig us out of it. Christmas Eve. The Class B dorm was all but deserted. A single low yellow light bathed the common room. A winter wind whistled past outside. Nearly everyone had gone to be with their families for the holiday. A few people that didn't celebrate it at all were still around, like Kamakiri and Suburaba for example. But Yui was pretty sure she was the only girl left. She walked across the common room and bent down to plug in the Christmas tree. It was the same plastic one from the year before, which Class B had put up yesterday. Their actual party would be on the 26th of December, along with Class A's. This was due to so many people being out on the actual holiday. The tree lit up with a rainbow of LEDs, and Yui allowed herself to smile a little, the lights reflecting in her blue eyes like fireflies over a deep pool. She folded her slender hands behind her back and rocked back and forth on her toes, just staring at the tree for a minute in a sort of serene bliss. Her phone buzzed on the table nearby. She wasn't wearing any pockets, so she'd set it down. Yui blinked and walked over to read the text message, expecting something from Ryuko, or maybe Itsuka. Her eye twitched. It was from her mother. Hey, Buttercup. I know you want to stay at school, and don't want to come see us for the holiday. But if you happen to change your mind, there's a place for you. We love you. Yui sniffed. Something wet dropped onto her phone screen and slowly ran off the bottom. She set her phone back down on the table, face down. I could respond, she thought. It'd be very rude to leave a message like that on read. But there was nothing to say. Nothing that wouldn't feel fake or forced or manufactured. And if the options were like that, then Yui Kodai absolutely preferred to stay silent. She turned. It was Nyaranjiki Shota, a short boy in her class who was actually quite nice. He was walking toward her with a somewhat happy expression. The boys who were left were gonna play some board games. Do you wanna? He stopped short, going pale. Whoa, are you okay? Yui neutralized her face. She hoped her eyes weren't shimmering or anything. Fine, she replied shortly. You all have fun. Oh, Shota frowned. Would you feel weird being the only girl? I'm sorry, I still feel bad. I don't want to leave you out. She shook her head. I'll be fine, she repeated. Well, okay. If you're sure. He gave her one last concerned look, and then went back upstairs. Yui sighed. Now she had people worrying over her. Was this how Seiya had felt, all those years ago? Maybe she should just go up there to whatever boys' room they would be in and try to enjoy herself. No, if she went up there now, they would make a big deal about it, and she'd be forced to be the center of attention. That was one thing about wearing a mask. At some point, it became such a part of your self-projection that even if you wanted to unmask yourself, the annoyance and discomfort of having everyone react in their different ways to your unmasking was too much. Her thoughts strayed back to her parents again. No. Izuku walked back into the dorm, shivering as he exited the winter's night. Oh, Midoriya, Yaoyorozu said in surprise. You're back already. Izuku put his phone in his jacket pocket. Yeah, my mom and I exchanged gifts and drank some hot chocolate. Then she said it was okay for me to come back here. I think she wanted to be alone. He frowned. Something about Dad, maybe. Well, in that case. Momo pressed her hands together. Takoyami, Tsu, Ajiro, Kirishima and I were all going to watch a movie. She nodded to the common area around the TV, where the others were sitting. Hello, Midoriya, said Takoyami. Ribbit, Asui echoed. Izuku realized these were all the people in his class whose families didn't really celebrate Christmas. Where's Todoroki? He asked. He knew for sure that Shoto had not gone home. Momo shrugged. Not sure. Kirishima patted the spot on the couch next to him. Have a seat, Midoriya. We're gonna watch Seven Samurai. Izuku blinked. Never heard of it. To be honest, he was really bad with movies unless it was something hero-related. It's a classic, released in the 20th century. I think you'll really like it. Nice and manly. Kirishima flashed a grin. Ajiro nodded. It's one of my favorites of all time. Momo was tapping her chin. We should get some snacks ready first. I'm on it, Ribbit, said Tsuyu. I can microwave popcorn. I'll help, Takoyami echoed, following her toward the kitchen area. While that gets prepared, I think I'm going to take a walk over to the Class B dorm and see if any of them want to join us. Momo frowned. Whoever's left over there must be awfully lonely. I know Itsuka went home, at least. Kirishima stood abruptly. Do you need someone to go with you? It's cold out there. Meanwhile, Ajiro was fiddling with the remote, and apparently having issues, because he cursed under his breath. Momo blinked. You're not dressed to go out. Midoriya still is. Okay. I'll go, Izuku said. They walked up to the Class B dorm, which was very dark. But there was a soft multicolored light coming out of one window. Someone turned on their Christmas tree. Momo used her higher clearance key and opened the door tentatively. Anyone home? Oh. Hello, Kodai. Izuku followed behind her, his heart skipping a beat as he heard the name. Sure enough, no one was down here but Yui. She was standing in front of the Christmas tree, watching it. Her pale, calm face was bathed with light. She turned slowly to face them, and her eyebrows rose a little when she saw Izuku. Hello, Yaoyorozu. Midoriya. When she said his name, her voice went a little quieter, breathier. Izuku wasn't sure what it was. Maybe because he hadn't seen her in a few days. Maybe it was the Christmas lights, the atmosphere. But tonight, for some reason, he couldn't take his eyes off of her. He was drinking up her appearance as she turned to face him. She was wearing a black spaghetti-strapped denim dress, with a white long-sleeved shirt on beneath it. The dress went past her knees, but beneath that she was wearing black tights and brown flats on her feet. She moved her arms to clasp her hands in front of her waist, and her boobs pushed together a little. Izuku blinked. He had forgotten the ability to speak. Yui stared right back at him. For a long moment, they stood there, suspended in time. Momo coughed. Well, Kodai... Are you alone in this building tonight? She shook her head. Some of the boys are upstairs. Well... Oh. I see. Our class was going to watch a movie. You're all welcome to come over and watch with us, if you like. Yui kept staring at Izuku. They are playing board games. I will come, though. She walked forward, clearly intending to join them on their walk back. Momo clapped her hands together in delight. Wonderful. Let's go back, then. She led the way, causing Yui and Izuku to fall in step together behind her. The wind hit them a bit hard as they exited the building, causing Yui to wince. Izuku was still wearing his jacket. Oh, did you? He moved to take it off and give it to her. She held up a hand. It's not far, she told him in a quiet voice. Momo looked back over her shoulder. I like your bracelet, Kodai, she complimented. Yui looked at the arm she'd lifted up, where a golden circle ringed her wrist. Thank you, she murmured. Itsuka and Satsuna got it for me. For my birthday. Right. That was a few days ago, wasn't it? Yui lowered her arm, and then stared at Izuku again. He gulped. He wasn't sure what to say. For some reason, his strange feelings for her were absolutely steamrolling him right now. I want her phone number. I want to go on more runs and have more conversations and maybe even hug her and cuddle her in. He knew his face was furiously red. Hopefully the dark overcast night was hiding it well enough, but he could sense Yui's deep blue eyes still upon him, as if she was waiting for something. What movie are we watching? She asked quietly. Oh, it's It's Seven Samurai. Yui made a small little sound of recognition. I have heard of that. That's cool. Because I haven't. Izuku scratched the back of his neck and smiled sheepishly. Yui giggled. You know, it's only a decade older than Ultraman. The 1950s, huh? Dang. Yeah. I don't know much about films, I guess. Yui looked forward as they walked, almost introspectively. I think you will like it. The samurai in it aren't pro-heroes or anything... but they are still heroes. Something doesn't have to have heroes in it for me to like it, Izuku muttered. Are you certain? Yui asked, mischief dancing in her eyes. Yes. They both giggled a little. Momo looked back at them, seeming both amused, confused, and intrigued. I have never heard Kodai say so much, she thought. And before, when she invited him out to run in front of everyone... they're going to be such a cute couple. They arrived back in the classic common room. Welcome back. Any recruits? Kirishima asked, before turning to look. Just one. Momo nodded to Yui before sitting down in one of the armchairs. Kirishima's mouth dropped a little, seeing Yui next to Izuku, but then he smiled. Welcome, Air. Kodai. Glad you're here. MMH, was Yui's response. Tsuyu and Takoyami returned to the TV area with snacks. Kodai, Ribbit, Asui acknowledged. The two girls shared a long look. Izuku noticed this and raised an eyebrow. Ajiro was sitting in the other armchair and threw the remote down with success. Got it, he blurted, sighing in relief. Some of these old Blu-rays, man. Anyway, we're ready to start. Buckle in, it's about 3 hours long. 3 hours, Takoyami repeated. I suppose we have nothing better to do. Meanwhile, Izuku went over to sit on the weirdest piece of furniture they had. It was just a little smaller than a two-person couch, but a little too big to be called a love seat per se. There was no thought process behind this, he just took a seat. Ajiro and Momo had taken the armchairs. Takoyami sat down next to Kirishima on the couch. Tsuyu and Yui stared at each other, and then at the two remaining places to sit. Either the last spot on the couch ... or alone with Izuku. Tsuyu raised an eyebrow in an almost challenging way. Yui just gazed. Come on, Kodai, make yourself at home. Kirishima slapped the spot on the couch next to him. Yui gave him a pointed look, and then walked primly over to Izuku's chair, plopping herself down next to him. Izuku froze. He had leaned back in the seat with his arms stretched out, but quickly retracted it. Tsuyu let out a sound that was half croak, half chortle, and took the spot where an offended-looking Kirishima had just patted. Better luck next time, Ribbit, she snickered at him. Takoyami continued to stare straight ahead, munching popcorn in his beak. Ajiro averted his eyes and whistled. Momo was watching with an amused expression. Let's start, Ajiro coughed. Most everyone here had been at either the snowball fight or had seen Yui ask Izuku on a run, so they were vaguely aware of what was going on. But it remained unacknowledged. For the boys in the room, the thought process didn't go much further than Kodai's, probably just most comfortable sitting next to Midoriya. Though both Momo and Tsuyu knew what was really going on. The movie began. Izuku tried to focus on the first minute, genuinely wanting to pay attention, but the girl next to him was pulling too much focus. Yui had not leaned all the way back, so her form was very much in the corner of Izuku's eye, a silhouette backlit by the glowing television. She was sitting up straight while he leaned back, her hands folded primly over her lap. Why doesn't she relax? Izuku swallowed, but his mouth was dry. Is my presence making her uncomfortable? Idiot, she did choose consciously to sit down next to you. But maybe that was only because it was the best option. He became very conscious of how the way she sat made the curve of her butt somewhat visible to him, and how those curves were just barely brushing against the side of his leg. Focus on the movie. Focus on the movie. Focus on the... Meanwhile, with Yui, I wonder if I stay leaned forward, will he take the hint? Will he put his arm back where it was? I want his arm around me. I want to snuggle and cuddle with him. Ah, this is bad. I can't focus on the film at all. I keep thinking about him behind me. Is he watching me? Maybe he's looking at my hips, or my butt. I'd like to think that I have plenty of both. She shifted herself slightly, so she was pressing against him a little more. But she didn't lean back yet. How else to make him aware? Aware that I really do like him. Ah, I should probably just take the initiative and lean back into him. But what if he doesn't respond well to that? Wait it out, and then feign being tired and lean back into the chair, almost as if you've forgotten he's there. So, for 30 more minutes, the film continued. Thoughts about their surrounding had long fled the thoughts of the others as the story pulled them in. But it took a little longer with Izuku. Until finally, he was able to focus and remove the Yui-sized blockage in his brain. That was, until she yawned, and finally leaned back into the seat, leaning slightly toward him. Her right side and his left side were touching almost all the way up. He could feel her breast against his arm. Izuku locked right up, like he'd been turned to stone. Every muscle in his body went stiff. His heart was racing something fierce. Without even realizing it, he'd clenched bunches of his pants with his fists. Yui saw this and smirked to herself. Those hands look awfully unrelaxed, Midoriya. I wonder how you'd react if I took one and held onto it. Forever, even. Whoa, that was a bit crazy. What was she thinking? That he was really warm, and firm, and comforting to the touch, even when he was all frozen like this. Come on, Midoriya, relax. Just relax. Another 45 minutes or so of the film passed. The tension in the film started to escalate, pulling them more and more into it ... and so, the tension outside of it started to melt away. Izuku once again forgot Yui's presence, though unknowingly, it was comforting him. Her softness, her warmth. Slowly over the course of the film, they leaned into each other, more and more. Her arms went around his arm, pressing her chest into it. Her breath tickled his neck. And then, as the film began to ramp up into the climax, Yui's head fell into the bend of his shoulder and neck, and remained there. She'd fallen asleep. Izuku froze again. This time, he looked up sharply away from the screen at the others. All of their eyes were glued to the TV, except for one person. Tsuyu. She stared at him out of the corner of her eye. It was often hard to tell when Tsuyu's expression changed, though not so difficult as it was with Yui. However, knowing her for fairly long, Izuku could tell when she was smirking. And she was now. His eyes narrowed, remembering their conversation at the cafeteria table. Tsuyu and the others think I have a crush on her. Well, maybe I do, but it's not like we can ever date. It would just never happen to someone like me, so why must the world play with me like this? Surely Yui falling asleep on him was an accident. When she woke up, she'd be mortified, right? He'd better wake her up as quickly as possible, or else he'd look like a creep, right? But he didn't want to interrupt the movie and she also seemed so peaceful. That makes 2 times a girl has fallen asleep on me this week. Oddly, I didn't care as much when Hagakure did it. I think maybe I'm more anxious about how Kodai perceives me than I am about Hagakure. But still, even if things turned out fine the first time, that doesn't mean Kodai will react the same way. Yui was sinking deeper and deeper into him, radiating hate like an oven. He felt her soft breath tickle his neck again. He could even hear her humming out of her nose a little. It was adorable. He hadn't realized it before, but she was clinging to him quite desperately as well. Her arms were wrapped all the way around his own arm, and he could feel her chest pressing against it. I should wake her up, right? I should. Sui shook her head once. Izuku's eyes widened. The message was clear enough. Don't. He looked back at Yui, confused. What could that mean? The 2 girls had shared an expression earlier that he hadn't understood and everything else that had been happening. Could Kodai possibly like me in that way? The puzzle pieces were sort of coming together, his brain trying to make that last leap in logic. But no, how would Suyu know? She was just giving him advice, that's all. Advice based on him wanting to be happy, not on any evidence she might actually have. Maybe she wants us to get together or something. But it would never happen. Right, the film ended. Izuku had not really mustered up the courage to wake Yui. But as the room darkened with the black of the credits, he realized he had to make a decision now. Yui did not live in this building, and it was almost midnight. She would have to move soon. Kirishima yawned. Just as good as I remembered it being. Takoyami nodded. I quite enjoyed that. I told you would, Ajiro said. Momo stood. We'd best be getting to bed. And oh. She looked pointedly at the sleeping Kodai. Well, someone ought to do something about that. Ajiro whistled again. Damn, Midoriya. She's stuck to you like glue. Kirishima gave him a thumbs up. Nice. Izuku was blushing furiously. It just kinda happened. Momo was inwardly fighting the urge to not coo with how adorable they were. I'll help you get her back to her dorm, she offered. Unless you'd rather just go by yourself. She smiled mischievously. Why? Izuku did not understand. Why are they all encouraging this so much? I mean, I can't get in there without your card. Momo tossed it to him. I'm awfully sleepy. Just leave it on the kitchen counter when you come back. She stretched and yawned, immediately turning to go up the stairs. Izuku's eyes widened. Hey, Yaoyorozu, why? She was already gone. Takoyami was looking at his phone. The temperature has dropped considerably. I do not think it is safe for Tsu or myself to go outside. Sorry, Midoriya. You're fastest among us anyway, Kirishima added. Izuku gently removed himself from Yui's grip, and immediately felt a sense of cold loss at no longer being touched by her. He shuddered and bit his lip. She sank into the seat a bit more, still asleep. It'd be rude to wake her, Ribbit, said Tsuyu. You should just bridal carry her back to her dorm. Can't do that, he protested. What if she wakes up, what if she… Midoriya-chan. Izuku broke from his stammering, surprised at Tsuyu's sharp tone. Her frog eyes were drilling right into him. Kodai does not mind. At all. Just trust me. Now, carry her back to her room so she can go to sleep properly. That's an order. Yes, ma'am, Izuku squeaked. Ajiro chuckled. Damn. Izuku leaned down and slowly, gingerly, picked Yui up in his arms. It wasn't difficult. Almost naturally, as if she'd done it inside her dream, her arms wrapped around his shoulders. She still breathed softly, fast asleep. Kirishima was still grinning. Hey, good luck, Midoriya. Izuku shot them all a glare and then turned to walk out into the night. Immediately, a cold wind struck him. Takoyami had been correct, the temperature had dropped a lot. Yui stirred and whined in her sleep, snuggling closer to his chest. He felt his heart ache with adoration for her. I hate this feeling, but I love it too. I want it to end, but I never want it to end. I feel just sick. Lovesick. Izuku set his face determinedly and activated his quirk, rushing them through the night toward the Class B dorm as fast as possible. With both hands occupied with Yui, he took Momo's key in his teeth and pressed it against the sensor, unlocking the door. All right, Kodai, he murmured softly as he crept inside. Let's get you to your room. Luckily, he knew the way, since he'd been up there once before. Mmmu, she muttered. Oh, was she waking up? He went upstairs, hearing noise come from one of the rooms on the far side of the hallway. He was glad that the Class B boys were still at it, and that none of them would see him doing this. He arrived at Yui's door. It was ajar. He was surprised, but then remembered that she had immediately joined them for the movie without even going back upstairs. She was awfully unprepared, she didn't even bring her phone. She just immediately agreed to join us. To join me. He swallowed again. He didn't want to get his hopes up about what that could mean. Slowly, he set Yui down on her bed. It smelled nice in here. He looked at the bedside table and saw his notebook there. Yui turned over and smacked her lips. He suddenly saw a glint of blue and froze, knowing that she'd opened her eyes. Midoriya, she breathed. Suddenly, she let out a sound that was almost a sob. Huh. All of Izuku's nerves fled him, replaced with concern. He knelt down by the bed. Kodai, is everything okay? You're not too cold, are you? I'm sore. Midoriya, she repeated. Her eyes opened all the way, and then her eyelids fell again. I miss my mom. Her voice broke. Goosebumps crawled up Izuku's arms. He'd never heard her mention her parents. I'm sorry, he repeated, feeling really useless. Midoriya ... my phone. It's on the table. Downstairs. Oh. He blinked and straightened up. I'll go get it for you, Kodai. He quickly ran back down, trying not to make any noise that would alert the boys, and brought her phone back up. He set it down next to her slumped form. Her eyes had closed again. Put your number into it, please, she slurred. Heat rushed up his cheeks. Hey, whoever's making this happen. Some tricky god who thinks this is funny. Can you stop playing with my emotions? Thanks. I don't know the passcode, he told her. She exhaled. He was worried she'd fallen all the way asleep again. I'll just write it down on a piece of paper, he said. You can put it in when you wake up. All right, Kodai. He tore a bit out of his own notebook, still on the bedside table, and wrote down his number. He left the scrap there. Then, he turned to go out the door. I have to get back now. Sleep well, Kodai. He could hear the longing in his own voice, and cringed inwardly. Midoriya, she purred again. His heart skipped several beats. Sint. A long sleepy breath overrode her word. Izuku's fist opened and closed. What was she going to say? Had she been asking him to stay? No, he couldn't believe that. He couldn't. Good night, Kodai, he whispered, closing the door between them. His heart had never felt so full of anything. It was Christmas morning. Izuku stirred and rolled over in his bed, reaching over to check his phone. Its white brightness blinded him for a moment. He had 3 text messages. Mom, good morning Izuku and Merry Christmas. I love you. All Might, Merry Christmas my boy. And the last was from an unknown number. This is Kodai. Thank you. He swallowed, his heart skipping a beat. He knew she was referring to how he'd carried her to bed last night. Part of him had thought she wouldn't remember, but that was silly. He quickly texted a Merry Christmas back to both his mother and All Might, and then prepared himself to text Yui for the first time. Izuku, it was no problem at all. Merry Christmas, Kodai. He saved her as a contact into his phone and then got up. Having interacted with both Kodai and All Might so early in the morning got him thinking. This feeling he had around her. Surely it was a dangerous distraction. He'd never heard of All Might getting into any romantic relationships. I ought to ask him. After last night, this had grown into too big of a problem to ignore. Kodai deserves better, anyway. He was hoping All Might would tell him to let it go so he could have a solid excuse for doing so. Nevertheless, there was something else that bothered him. Kodai last night ... she'd said she missed her mom. Was her mom dead? Or perhaps they were estranged. It occurred to Izuku that he still had no idea why Kodai was so quiet. He had partially just assumed it was in her innate nature, but maybe something had caused it. I know for a fact that I wasn't always inherently so anxious ... part of it is Kaken's doing. The hero in Izuku wanted to help her. But, he knew when it came to girls ... that was not always the best mentality to have. Kodai was a strong person in her own right. She hadn't mentioned what she'd said in her text, so maybe she didn't remember that part. Was it something she didn't want him to know about? Izuku wanted to respect her privacy as well. Even still, if she's feeling lonely on Christmas. As he went down the steps into the common room, it occurred to him that he'd already sort of missed her birthday, even though she'd seemed really happy with what had actually gone down. I should get her a Christmas present. He was no longer concerned with what kind of statement that might make. He just wanted to make her happy again, like she'd been about the notebook. But Izuku had not bought her a Christmas present. He'd bought presents for Ajiro and Ishido, as part of the Secret Santa that Classa had done, but nothing else. And it was literally Christmas Day ... far too late to go buy something. Kodai likes tokusatsu. Can't go out and buy anything Ultraman related now. Stores will be closed or cleared out. Can't order it online, won't get here in time. Come on, Izuku, think ... what else has she said she likes? Something buried deep in his memory seemed to surface. He wasn't even sure if it was something she had told him directly, floating in the collective consciousness, something he'd overheard. Yui liked those Russian nesting dolls. Something about the way they changed in size and how that was similar to her quirk. Where had he heard that from? It connected. Yaoyorozu. Yaoyorozu makes those all the time. She disguised one as a flashbang while fighting me in an exercise one time and blinded me for like 5 hours. Well, that made things simple, didn't it? He arrived downstairs, where Yaoyorozu herself was getting some breakfast along with Tsu and Takoyami. Sato said he'd be getting back around 11. Momo looked up from her phone. Oh, good morning Midoriya. Morning, Takoyami echoed. Tsu blinked at him. How'd it go last night? Izuku feigned innocence. How did what go? Tsu deadpanned. You taking Kodai-chan back to her dorm. I took her back to her dorm. She's safe, if that's your meaning. You know that it isn't. Izuku leaned over in the fridge and pulled out a jug of orange juice. It's too early for me to deal with this. Plus it's Christmas. He did not necessarily want to say that he had literally just been thinking about her. Need to find a better time to ask Yaoyorozu about that. Itsuka Kendo yawned as she re-entered the Class B dorm. Setsuna was at her side almost immediately. Welcome back, Prise. We're still waiting on a few more people so we can start the gift exchange. It was early afternoon now, and most of the students who had spent Christmas morning with their families had come back to the UA campus. Scanning the common room, Itsuka could indeed see that she was one of the last to arrive. Did you have a good holiday, Setsuna? The lizard girl shrugged. My folks are irritating. My little brothers got everything they wanted, the spoiled brats. Over in the kitchen area, Kaibara and Kiwara were accusing each other of eating an entire bag of chips while Shishida tried to break them up. Honuki and Tsunotori were sitting in front of the TV. Monoma was lurking over by the fake tree. It was a busy scene. Yui and Ryuko were sitting on the couch nearby, so Itsuka walked over to them. Ryuko nodded at her. Merry Christmas. Right back at ya. You have a good holiday. Ryuko blinked mysteriously. Spellbinding, she replied. Itsuka made a face at that, and then looked at Yui. What did you do, Yui? The boys didn't give you a hard time while you were here by yourself, did they? Yui shook her head. I spent the evening watching a movie with Class A. Setsuna whistled. All of them. Another head shake. Only 6. Was one of them Midoriya? Setsuna grinned. The dark-haired girl flushed an abrupt red. It was easily the most emotion Itsuka had ever seen from her. Setsuna cackled. Goodness, Itsuka commented. I knew. She looked around briefly to see if anyone was in earshot. No one really was besides Ryuko, who already knew all about this. Nevertheless, Itsuka leaned in and lowered her voice. I knew you and him had something going on, but that face. Yui, tell us the truth. Did something happen? Ryuko was grinning, indicating that Yui had already told her whatever it was. Come on, Setsuna begged. Tell us. Yui bit her lip. She cuddled with him, Ryuko blurted, eyes glinting mischievously. Then he bridal carried her back to her room. Setsuna laughed really loudly, and this time when Yui blushed, Itsuka blushed with her. That's, she hissed. Yui. Yui was glaring daggers at Ryuko, but then turned to look at Itsuka with a panicked expression. It wasn't like that, she claimed. He dropped me off because I was sleepy. He left after that. Damn girl, Setsuna cried out. You didn't tell him to stay. He totally would have. I don't fully know what I said to him. She was still blushing. I did get his phone number though. Hee, you go get her, you. You got him something for Christmas, right? Setsuna asked. Itsuka scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. But Yui actually nodded. I've been working on something for him since he gave me the notebook. Oh my god, Yui, Itsuka put her hand to her face. I didn't realize it was this bad. What's got your massive hands up your ass, Class Prise? Setsuna complained. Yui's getting her man. Yeah, but she shouldn't expect anything in return. That seems harsh, Ryuko commented. Do you think little of Midoriya for some reason, Kendo? Do. Suddenly, all 3 girls were looking at her with interest. No, not really. Setsuna's eyes narrowed. You're hiding something. No, it's not. Itsuka held up her hands and sighed. It's not even really anything to hide. I'm just looking out for Yui, that's all. Don't take this the wrong way, but this is the most I've ever seen you openly care about anything, and I don't want you to get hurt. Yui tilted her head. Why would I get hurt? Well, if you were going off these assumptions based on Midoriya's behavior well, when I went to go help Classa pick up their Christmas tree, I saw him with Toru Hagakure, the invisible chick. Setsuna blurted, confused. Yeah, I guess they were kind of flirting. I'm not sure. That's what it seemed like to me from the outside, but Midoriya may not even be aware. That's the thing with him. Yui's face twitched. Hagakure, she half whispered. Again, I'm not saying it was this scandalous thing that I oversaw, Itsuka reiterated. Just that's kind of his way, you know. Acting anxious around girls, complimenting them a lot without really realizing what he's doing. No, said Ryuko. Both Setsuna and Itsuka looked at her. No, I agree with you to an extent, but it's different with Yui. It's not his normal form of nervous. You two haven't seen him around her as much. I think it's different. There you have it, Setsuna said. Nothing to worry about, please. Don't be such a stick in the mud. Look, you asked if I was hiding something, so I explained what I was thinking about. I saw Midoriya with Hagakure there, that's all. I'm gonna go upstairs for a bit, Yui said frankly, and stood up and walked away. Ryuko sighed. Setsuna punched Itsuka lightly in the arm. Look what you did. Itsuka glared daggers at her. It's you who's always coaxing the conversation into these sorts of topics. And I let out information she didn't want more widely known, Ryuko said with a sigh, standing up too. We're all at fault. We should just let Yui handle this on her own. I did get a bit loud, I suppose. Setsuna murmured, then looked around the busy room, at the boys doing various activities. Doesn't seem like anyone was paying attention, though. Itsuka saw a flash of blonde out of the corner of her eye, and whirled to meet it, but then it was gone. Huh, that's weird, Ryuko commented. I could have sworn Monoma was standing by the Christmas tree a minute ago. It was now afternoon, and class was doing their gift exchange. They did the same thing they'd done last year, where everyone was assigned 2 others to give presents to. That way everyone received at least 2 gifts. Mina Ashido was sitting on the couch as the room filled with chaos. Bakugo could be heard shouting about whatever Mina had just given him. Siro was feverishly tearing wrapping paper off of something nearby. Next to Mina, Toru was sitting, awaiting her first gift. Midoriya walked up to them, and Toru seemed to sit up really straight all of a sudden. But then he handed a wrapped box to Mina. Uo. Mina cooed, taking it from him happily. I'm one of your people. Thanks, Midori. I hope you like it, Midoriya told her honestly, smiling back. Mina was comfortable in the knowledge that he did not have a crush on her. He acted way too put together around her. It was sort of a bummer, but hey, couldn't win 'em all. As she unwrapped, Midoriya briefly turned to acknowledge Toru. Merry Christmas, Hagakure. Oh, you didn't get anything yet. Toru sighed. No, unfortunately. Well, I'm sure your 2 people will get to you soon. There's no way Ada missed anyone on the randomizer, so. He stutters when talking to Toru a little bit. Mina wondered what that meant, but she interrupted herself by opening the box. Uo. She lifted the shirt up. It was for one of her old favorite movies, Blade Runner. It depicted a cyberpunk scene. This is amazing, Midori. She hugged it to herself. A girl could fall in love, you know. Hee, don't say that. Midoriya chuckled nervously. Out of the corner of her eye, Mina noticed a subtle change in Toru's body language. Something was going on, but she was too distracted to get to the bottom of it. Midoriya moved off and was suddenly replaced by Yaoyorozu. Hey there, ladies, she said in a somewhat exhausted voice. Yeah, Momo. You look tired, queen. Must be tough carrying this party on your shoulders. Mina scooted over on the couch and patted it. Wanna sit down? No, I'm just here to give Hagakure her present. Momo handed the invisible girl a present bag. Oh, Toru said, somewhat distantly. Thank you, Yaoyorozu. Momo raised an eyebrow at her demeanor. Everything all right, Hagakure? Yes, I'm fine. She threw the cover paper out of the bag, somewhat aggressively, and then pulled out a pair of those new customizable sneakers that Mina had seen in commercials. Oh, are these the ones you can paint on and stuff? Yes, Momo nodded excitedly. And you can remove the paint and redo it with any design you want. The material is actually quite interesting. She stopped herself, deadpanning. Never mind, I know you don't care. It's fine. Thanks a lot, Toru chirped. Hey, before you go, Mina said, grabbing Momo's arm. I think I need your help with something. Yaoyorozu raised her eyebrow. And what's that? Midoriya and Kodai. Mina half expected Momo to wilt in exasperation. But instead, a strange twinkle entered her eye. You know, you really should have been here last night, Ashido-san. W-hat. What happened? Oh my god, tell me. Mina leaned all the way forward. Kodai came over here to watch a movie with us. She sat in the love seat with Midoriya and they cuddled for like 2 hours straight. Then he took her back to her room. Mina almost screamed in surprise. She was totally unaware of Toru starting to shake uncontrollably next to her. Are you serious? She hissed. They didn't do anything, if that's what you're wondering, Momo reassured. Mina pouted. Damn. But, if you were planning on giving them another push, Momo smirked. Last night Sue was the one who made him escort her back. I think she and Uraraka are working to set them up as well. Well, we're a Jiru short of having the whole gang trying to get Midoriya laid. Momo shook her head. Don't be silly, Ashido-san. I don't think that is what either of them are looking for. Nevertheless, I want to do something. Today. Yeah, Momo, I know you said you don't make fake plans, but... She raised her eyebrows. I believe I know exactly what you're about to say. And, I think this time, I'll make an exception. Woot woot. Mina pumped her fist in the air. Oh, this is gonna be great. Toru, you in on this? She turned to look at her best friend as Yaoyorozu walked off. Toru was sitting very still. The invisible girl squeaked. I think I'm going to go back to my room for a while. Whoever else got me a present, just tell them to leave it outside my door. Mina's face fell as Toru got up and left. Why, that was seriously weird. One of the things Mina loved about Toru was how expressive she was. It never felt like she was invisible. But now for the first time it felt like she was using her quirk as a mask. To hide from Mina. And doesn't that just suck? A little while later, Izuku was sitting next to Uraraka and Ada. He was getting somewhat anxious and he didn't even know why. At least Ashido and Ajiro seemed to like their presence. Ada, Uraraka prodded, with a side glance at Izuku. Don't you think we should link up with Class B? Their party will be over soon, too. Perhaps. Ada stroked his chin. I would not want to interrupt them when we're done, however. Perhaps Yaoyorozu could touch base with Kendo. I could indeed, said Momo, walking up to them. Were you talking about getting together with the other class? Yes, Uraraka nodded eagerly. Then, both girls looked at Izuku again. He squirmed under their gazes. What's this all about? Ada continued on, oblivious. Let Kendo know that we're wrapping up here and we all could come together and hang out. I will do that, Momo told him, and turned to leave. Wait, Yaoyorozu, Izuku blurted suddenly. Could I ask you for a favor? She blinked. All right. He led her away from his other friends, to a quieter corner of her room. It's, Izuku bit his lip. I'm sorry. I shouldn't ask this of you, it's really dumb. No, no, please go on, Momo said, grabbing his wrist. Is this about Kodai? He wilted. You catch on to things too quickly. You want to get her something for Christmas but haven't bought anything. You want me to make her something. What the heck? You're terrifying, Yaoyorozu. She grinned at him. You're just more predictable than you wish you were, I think. That's what it means to be a pining young man. And how would you know about that? Izuku grumbled. Your romance novels. She pouted. Jiru has really blown that trait of mine out of proportion when talking to others. Do you want my help or not? His eyes twinkled. You'll do it. I know you never like to create anything for people in situations like this. Yes, but this is different. I know exactly what it's for and support it entirely. Plus, you're you, Midoriya. What is that supposed to mean? Well, you know you're not Kaminari or Mindor. Izuku deadpanned at her. Wow, that's really not fair at all. Life isn't fair. Momo huffed and blew one of her bangs off her face. Anyway, what would you like me to make? Those Russian nesting dolls you always make. I know she likes those. Momo raised an eyebrow. That's it. Midoriya, you should have a better plan than that. I almost don't want to even help you if it's that simple. Well, I don't want to overburden you with anything. Yes, but nesting dolls. I know she likes them, but it feels like you're just picking something you know I can make really easily, and washing your hands of it. No, ideally I would have gotten her something tokusatsu related, but I can't exactly have you make a DVD of a TV series. I'm pretty sure that's impossible even for you. Midoriya, Momo said, in a somewhat lower, more serious voice. Can I ask you something? Yes, of course. How did you feel when carrying Kodai back to her room? Or even before, when you were cuddling? Really anxious. Yes, but beyond that. Izuku swallowed. The feelings of the previous night had been fading over the course of the day in potency, but not going away completely. It feels like a lot. Like, painful, almost. Yeah, really painful. Hard to even think about it without feeling sick. But also it's sweet, at the same time. So sweet it's dangerous. Like those two feelings push and pull and mix with each other until I feel like I'm gonna throw up, to be honest. Momo sniffled. Izuku looked up in alarm. Yaoyorozu, are you crying? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. You're in love, Midoriya, Yaoyorozu told him, smiling and wiping her eye. Why? What makes you say that? My cheesy romance novels, she told him, crossing her arms and grinning. Izuku huffed. I know what to make for Kodai, Midoriya. You said she liked tokusatsu. I happen to know a little bit about the genre myself. Yui was surrounded by chatting, laughing people, but she was only looking for one. She held his notebook tight to her chest, her heart beating like crazy beneath it. Turned her head left. Right. There were some of the people she'd been with last night, Kirishima and Ajiro and Takoyami. More of her own classmates over by the sofa. The light was low, with only the Christmas lights set up around the room bathing the room in a multicolored sullen glow. Outside it was dark, the sun had set. There he was. It was like the waters had parted to spot him. He was over in the kitchen area, with hardly anyone nearby. And he was looking around in a sort of lost way, too. Yui felt a smile grow on her face without her permission, and walked up behind him. She tapped him lightly on the shoulder. Were you perhaps looking for me? Gah. He jumped. KK Kodai. Good to see you. She bit her lip. He was stuttering again. With a confidence she didn't much feel on the inside, she held his notebook out to him. It is good to see you too, Midoriya, she breathed. Merry Christmas. He took the book back from her and managed a shaky, playful smile. I'm pretty sure it's not fair play on Christmas to give someone a gift that already belonged to them. She raised an eyebrow. Then why don't you look inside? His eyes widened. He, intrinsically, opened the notebook right to her page. How many times has he done that for it to become second nature? Heat rushed to her cheeks. There was a tiny piece of green cloth sitting on the page. He lifted it up gingerly, turning it over in his fingers. Kodai. I'm sorry, but I don't understand. She pressed her fingers together and grew the gift back to its original size. It became a green scarf. That was just to make it able to hide inside the book, she said. Her heart was racing something fierce now as she watched him. He was gaping at the scarf in surprise. I knit it myself. Do you like it? She wished she hadn't sounded so vulnerable there. He closed his eyes and tilted his head, smiling. I love it, Kodai. It's wonderful. You're so talented. Her heart skipped several beats. He was so cute in that moment. She rocked back and forth on her toes, unable to calm herself down. I'm not that great. Nonsense. He put the scarf on and gazed at her expectantly. How does it look? She stared for a moment, then laughed a little in her breathy, musical kind of way. A bit funny, since you are only wearing a t-shirt. Izuku pouted. Right, I get it. He unwound the scarf, but shared in her giggling for a moment. Kodai, It's okay, she interrupted. You didn't have to get me anything. It was only just my birthday, after all. But I did actually get you something. He reached into the pocket of his baggy sweatpants and pulled out. Yui's eyes widened. It was a nesting doll, but no ordinary nesting doll. It was painted to look like Ultraman. A custom Ultraman nesting doll. Where on earth had he found this? It was the combination of two of her favorite things, and her heart was stirring. Sorry I didn't wrap it or anything. Midoriya muttered, handing it to her. Gingerly, Yui opened the doll to see the smaller one inside. It was another Ultraman, but of a different design, one of the earlier ones. She opened that one and found another from even earlier. And it went like that all the way down. This is so cool. She breathed. Tears were swimming in her eyes as she closed the doll's back. It's the best thing I've ever gotten. Thank you, Midoriya. Oh no, Kodai, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make Hyukuri, I'm sorry. It's because I'm happy, silly, she interrupted him. She looked up and met his eyes. For the first time in a long time, she was openly smiling and not feeling self-conscious about it. Her mask had fully dropped before him. Because no one else is watching. He feels like the one I can be myself around. Suddenly, she noticed something above Midoriya's head, and her eyes widened in shock. Her smile faded just a tad. There was mistletoe hanging above him. Panic flooded Yui's brain. Mistletoe, surely fake, and put there by someone as a joke. But now that the thought had hijacked her, she knew she did want to kiss him. She wanted to do that a lot. Her eyes threatened to dart down to his lips. This would be a good moment to do it. No. A happy moment between them, somewhat intimate, no one else around. But it was a hard thing, taking that step forward and just doing it. She'd never kissed anyone before. TV made it look really easy, but now she was terrified. What if he reacted poorly? It could set them back on a ton of social progress they'd both made. And that would just suck. No, the moment had passed. It was too late. She'd spent too long thinking about it. Shall we go enjoy the party? Midoriya was asking her. Yes, all right. Yui returned to her neutral face. He seemed to understand that it was for the others. He is beginning to get me, I think. She suspected she might have said something about her family last night to him. But he hadn't asked about it, and he hadn't seemed to notice the mistletoe either. So she followed him back to the others. One of her arms cradled the doll, but she reached down with the other hand and slipped it in his. Surely he'd be okay with this. We cuddled last night, and even close friends hold hands sometimes. She'd used to do it with Seiya, after all. Midoriya stiffened for a moment, but didn't look at her, and relaxed fairly quickly. His hand did not leave hers as they rejoined the party. Izuku woke up feeling really content and refreshed, but could not remember why for a moment. He flexed his fingers, feeling like he was holding the ghost of something in his hand. Oh right, it was Kodai's hand. We held hands. He blushed. The memories from the party last night were something of a blur, but he remembered that at least. She had kept her hand in his for quite a few minutes as they went around and spoke to people, but no one had seemed to notice or comment on it. Eventually they had separated. It made Izuku's heart race just to think about it, but at the same time, he had no idea what it meant. Holding hands is something you do with someone you like, right? Did she like him? Was that her way of expressing it instead of using words? He just couldn't believe it. Even with the encouragement from others like Momo and Tsuyu, and Kodai herself opening up a bit around him, and displaying certain signs. He still felt like he couldn't trust himself to jump to conclusions. He imagined himself asking the question, Kodai. Do you like me? She would turn and fix that blank blue stare on him. Maybe even turn up her nose or curl her lip in disgust. That's what the girls at Aldera would have done. Or maybe she'd raise her eyebrows in surprise. And her eyes would fill with sad pity. Oh no, Midoriya. I'm sorry. It seems you've misinterpreted the situation. And then things would be awkward for the rest of all eternity. His life would be over. Or she would turn, those blue eyes half-lidded, her perfect glossy dark hair blowing in the breeze a little, and her lips would turn up into a smile. And she'd say an enthusiastic mmHmm. I've been waiting so long for you to figure it out. A goofy grin crossed Izuku's face, and then he snapped himself out of it. Yeah, right. He'd already had one insane fantasy fulfilled for him in his life, when All Might told him he could become a hero after all. 2 would be asking too much. Speaking of which, even if Kodai did like him back, what would he do then? Enter a relationship with her. He didn't have the slightest idea how to do that, and he wouldn't have time what with all the training he had to do to perfect one for all, and become the next symbol of All Might. I should ask All Might about this. Surely he would have some knowledge on the topic. There was a lot of popular speculation that the man was asexual, but Izuku didn't really think so. Surely he'd loved someone before, and had to make the hard decision. If he heard a definitive path he should take from All Might, that would clear his troubled heart, surely. Even after that, though, I'd like to remain friends with Kodai. She's made me feel really happy recently. He pulled out his phone and decided to send her a text. Just a simple good morning. And that was all. Not thinking much of it, he pocketed his phone and decided to go looking for All Might. Yui was sitting with Ryuko and drinking juice at the kitchen counter when her phone buzzed. Her eyes widened, and her mouth opened a little. It was from Izuku. It said good morning. Ryuko peered up at her with one exposed eye. Yui, your cheeks are red. Hey, she muttered quietly and then turned her phone around. Ryuko looked down at it and whistled. A good morning text, huh? So did you guys seal the deal or what? Yui pouted. You're as bad as Setsuna. Well, both her and I want the same thing. For you to be happy. Ryuko shrugged. It's nice to see him taking initiative. Yui nodded. Yes, she whispered in agreement. Perhaps I should take initiative back. Ryuko finished for her, like she always did. MMMHMM. How much time did you two spend together at the party? Yui pouted again. Not enough, huh? Yui looked down at her phone and typed out a response. Good morning, Midoriya. Would you like to hang out today? Ryuko whistled again. My. How forward of you, Yui. Yui raised a concerned eyebrow. Are you telling me not to send it? Are you kidding me? Send that text, Yui. I'll do it for you if you want. No, Yui interrupted her, as forcefully as Yui was like to ever say anything. I'll do it. She pressed send. Izuku's phone buzzed, but he was already walking into All Might's office, and so he didn't check it immediately. Toshinori Yagi was half slumped over his desk, folding some papers. He looked up with his sunken blue eyes. Young Midoriya, you shouldn't slouch at your desk like that. It's bad for your back, sir. All Might smiled slightly. Let me know if you're still so motivated to have good posture when you get to be 7 feet tall. Izuku's eyes widened. Will that happen to me? I'm honestly not sure. Toshinori scratched his neck. What did you need, young Midoriya? Advice. Izuku walked over to the chair in front of the desk and sat down. It's ERM. About his face reddened. All Might raised his eyebrows. Oh dear, has One for All done something strange to your body? No, well, not recently. Nothing new. Izuku rubbed his arm and stared at the floor. It's about. He looked at All Might again, and his throat closed up. Ugh, why can't I just say it? It's about a G-girl. Toshinori paled. I see. He coughed and looked toward the side wall nervously. Izuku wilted. It was the exact sort of reaction he had been dreading. All Might isn't good with this sort of stuff, but maybe he does have something he can tell me. Well, young Midoriya, I confess I have very little experience in these matters. Izuku was surprised to hear that. Really? I thought, surely you've loved someone in the past, at least. Of course I did, Toshinori said softly. I loved my master, Nana Shimura. Izuku felt a strange feeling in his chest. Oh, he muttered. But it was a hopeless love, of course, and born more of admiration and respect than anything. But it was real. She knew me before I'd really grown up, though. So that was never our dynamic. She prepared me to face All for One, and then she died. All that time spent. I never thought of anything else when I could afford it. I was completely dedicated to the duty of One for All. Even when you were in America. All Might nodded. By then the fire of hero work was what drove me, and it drove me until I became the symbol of peace. By then, the idea of doing something like dating or settling down. It became impossible. And that was before you threw All for One's continued survival into the equation. Izuku sighed, his shoulders slumping. You're telling me I'll have to be the same way. Look at me, Izuku. Though he'd given All Might the privilege to use his first name, the man rarely did so. Izuku realized how serious he was. He looked. Who is this girl? Asked Toshinori Yagi. Izuku swallowed, his mouth dry. Yui Kodai. All Might's eyebrows shot a mile up. Kodai in Class B. I confess, I saw the two of you running together one recent morning. I thought it was very strange, but then I forgot about it. Have you been spending time with her? When I can. Izuku wrung his hands. We're at this strange stage. We haven't been together all that much, but we're both trying to find opportunities to get to know each other better, I think. We're friends, and becoming closer friends. And I can't stop thinking about her. All those words just spilled out of him awkwardly, unevenly. Toshinori looked at him with concern. Do you like her in that way, young Midoriya? I believe I do, yes. It felt like turning a corner, admitting it out loud to someone, even if Yaoyorozu had already accused him. Do you think she likes you? I have no idea. Well, I suppose she is a strangely detached, aloof girl. All Might stroked his chin. Not the sort I imagined you getting into this situation with. That's what I like about her, though, Izuku insisted. Wait, you imagined me getting into this situation? Yes, I confess it. Most often I worried about young Uraraka or young Ishido. You're a high-strung young man, and I could see their carefree energy complementing you well. Izuku felt oddly disappointed. A lot of people think so, apparently. Uraraka and I have never been like that. Why do you say you worried, though? Because, All Might sighed. There's no easy way to say it, young man. I don't believe you should pursue this further. Those words hit Izuku like a cold bag of ice to the back of the neck. It slowly slid down his spine, settling in his soul. What did I expect him to say? Oh, it sounds as if you're in a position where you can still turn back without hurting her or your own feelings. I believe that is the correct course for you. Izuku's throat had never felt drier. He opened his mouth to talk and had to force it out, his legs starting to tremble. But why does hearing this feel so awful? Do I need to spell it out for you? You said yourself that you have been unable to spend much time together. You're too busy to date someone, Izuku. Especially someone in a different class than you, who you may only see every once in a while in the halls. You have not fully mastered every quirk granted to you by One for All, and many of our greatest enemies are still out there. This is not a distraction you can afford to have. I could not afford it at your age, you cannot afford it now. I see. Didn't I know this? Didn't I come here to receive confirmation? So why did he feel like crying? Every word was like a knife in his heart. If you did start to date young Kodai, people would find out and villains would exploit it. It often happens to hero couples. Just look at the water hose team, and that boy you ended up saving. While many hero families have been successful, there are many more that end like that. Izuku gasped, trying to hold his body back from starting to completely shake all over. He couldn't look his mentor in the eye. All Might's voice grew softer. You came to me for advice, young Midoriya. Did you just expect me to tell you what you wanted to hear? Yes, actually, but in the opposite way you think. What he thought he wanted to hear wasn't what he wanted to hear after all. I wouldn't let myself get exploited, he muttered. Villains have put me to that test B before. You've seen it. I have always risen to the challenge. Yes, but can you say the same for her? All Might said gently. I've taught her just like I have the rest of you. She is technically competent, but her decision-making in the heat of the moment is on the lower side of your class level, and far lower than yours. Izuku looked down at his trembling hands. And watched them close into fists. You're not being fair, he heard himself say. Fair. What wouldn't be fair would be to bring that girl into matters far beyond her when she is unprepared to handle them. I don't want you to let feelings cloud your judgment. They're not clouding my judgment, but you don't even know her that well yet. What if you're idealizing her, young Midoriya? I'm not. While it's true that my feelings might be stronger than they should be at this stage of our relationship, isn't that just more proof that this is truly worth pursuing? All Might wasn't done. What happens if your relationship never properly gets serious, but you end up wanting to tell her about one for all too soon? What happens if you tell her and you have a bad breakup, and she wants to exploit that information she now holds against you? What happens if you do get serious, and she becomes targeted by all for one? Each question branded his heart like a fire poker. Izuku's mouth twitched. A lot of the shake was gone, and his voice felt strangely steady. The cold had been replaced with the dark heat rising in him. Kodai is a hero too, All Might, he said in a low voice. His eyes were still on the floor, but they were threatening to flick upward. You're not giving her enough credit. She is more than capable of standing up for herself. All for one is different. As strong as you are, you're not even ready to face him. And then if you look at her. Don't. Izuku interrupted. He looked up at his mentor now, letting the anger completely take hold of him. Don't finish that sentence, All Might. Do not call her weak. Toshinori paled. I wasn't. Young Midoriya, I am only telling you that. What about the other people you've personally entrusted with your secret over the years? David Shield, Tsukachi, Cementos. Are you saying they're all weak as well? Why did you tell them, then? Young Midoriya, you know what I think. Izuku stood. I think one for all is mine now, not yours. And I think who I choose to involve or not to involve in it is my business, not yours. So if those are the only reasons you have as to why I shouldn't try to start something with Kodai. Then I don't want to hear it. You. All Might sputtered. But where would you find the tea time? I'll figure it out. Izuku promised. He raised his fist up to his chest. I've balanced a lot of things at once before, and it may be hard, but she's worth it. We'll figure it out together. His last words rang about the room, his chest heaving. A silence emerged. Slowly, Izuku watched All Might's face strangely. Relax. He awkwardly realized all the words he'd just said. They'd all sort of just escaped him. Oh my god. I just got really angry at him. And I said she was worth it. What is happening to me? Color rose in his cheeks as he grew more and more confused by All Might's strangely relaxed expression. Then the man smiled. Well, said Toshinori Yagi, if all that's the case, then I suppose you should hurry up and ask the girl out. No. Why? Izuku's arms fell to his sides, limp. Were you testing me? Difficult to say. Still grinning, as if none of the intense debate between them had even happened, All Might returned to folding his papers. Best get going, young Midoriya. Stunned and even more confused than ever, Izuku left the office. As he walked down the halls of UA, his head spun, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But then he remembered he'd heard his phone buzz right before he'd gone in to talk to All Might. He took it out of his pocket now to read the text message. Oh, he thought, gasping. His ears heated up. It was from Kodai. She was asking him if he wanted to hang out. Izuku set his face determinedly and typed back, sure. Why don't we meet at the school gate at 3 and go out into town? No more messing around. Things had never fallen into Izuku Midoriya's lap. Even to get All Might's attention to become his successor in the first place, he'd had to run into fire and sludge to risk his life for his friend. And he would have to take a risk again. Even though he wasn't sure if Kodai liked him back, he would try his best. And he would only give up if he received absolute confirmation that she did not. That's right. I'm a hero. And so is she. Nito Monoma watched Yui Kodai walking over to the school gate. She was dolled up like she was going somewhere, and he was pretty sure he knew well, not where she was going, but who she was going with. Any minute now he'll show up. He checked one of his many watches. The time was 2:56. They must have agreed to meet at 3. They probably text each other. It's sickening. As of late, Nito had grown more and more frustrated with his class's lack of growth. While they had technical skill, excellent teamwork with one another, and a good sense of macro strategy, time and time again they showed lack of aggression and drive. Not only could that mean death on the battlefield as they approached that ever-present date where they would graduate and join the war against the dark villains that loomed over Japan, but it also meant that they would be forever stuck behind class, and that would just not do. I have to keep lighting that fire under them. The rivalry must be sustained. Those feelings of frustration after the sports festival and the joint training where their class utterly showed us up. They must keep those in mind if we are to ever reach our full potential as a class. And if someone from his own class started a relationship with one of them. That would be directly counter to that feeling they needed. Kodai would fall behind. And Nito would never admit this aloud, lest risk a chopping to the neck courtesy of one Itsuka Kendo, but he'd always thought Kodai was pretty eternally slightly behind to begin with. She could not afford this extra distraction. He had the catalyst he needed. That thing he'd overheard Kendo talking about. Hagakure and Midoriya flirting. Hagakure was the invisible girl, someone Monoma had never paid much attention to, but he was now. In his observations in the last few days, he had noticed her often hovering near Midoriya when she should otherwise be somewhere else. She must like him. Well, she can. Him. At first, he'd actually directly considered walking up to Hagakure and offering to be her wingman, but that would never work. The invisible girl definitely wouldn't trust his intentions, and besides, he was fairly sure she was doomed to fail anyway. Midoriya and Kodai were already too far along in their feelings for each other. No, but he could still use the invisible girl to his advantage. He sensed that someone in this web of intrigue would take action soon, and it would probably be her. That would leave Midoriya with the choice. And surely that nervous, muttering boy would not be up to the task of being immediately decisive. Nito would use this window of opportunity to drive the wedge. He doubted he could ever make the two of them get genuinely upset with one another, and he even doubted that he could get anyone to believe him if he started spreading a certain rumor or two. But that wouldn't matter. All that would matter is that Midoriya and Kodai were at the center of the situation. Because if there was one thing that those two had in common, they're both uncomfortable being the center of attention. All he had to do was cause a scene. Cause one scene, and suddenly the two of them, regardless of their feelings, would feel extraneous factors pulling them back from each other. They might even be demotivated enough to stop pursuing one another entirely. Soon. It has to be soon. If he didn't catch Hagakure making her move before New Year's Eve, he would act then. And next year will turn a new leaf for Class B at last. Izuku arrived at the school gate at 3 like they'd planned. And when he saw Yui, he briefly lost the ability to speak. She was wearing a cream-colored tight sweater, tucked in at her waist, which was circled by a stylish dark belt that held up a plaid skirt. She had dark tights over her legs, and a fur scarf around her shoulders. Yui turned and saw him. A small smile danced across her lips. "Hello, Midoriya. Your mouth is open." He shut it abruptly, causing her smile to widen a little. "What?" she asked. "Well, it's just you look really rich." Yes, it's the scarf." Yui's blue eyes twinkled. Izuku could tell she was amused with him. He sighed inwardly. "Rich, really. Best compliment you could come up with for your date, Izuku." Except it wasn't a date. Not at all. Nope. He dressed in a tight sweater of his own, and a pair of gray slacks. If Kodai thought anything of his appearance, she gave nothing away. Izuku didn't know what he'd expected. Anyway, he coughed, "Shall we?" Instinctively, he put his arm out at his side at a bend, the way his mom had shown him once. "This is how you escort a lady, Izuku," she told him. A second later, he realized that Kodai probably didn't know what that gesture even meant, let alone would actually follow through with it. After all, they weren't dead in. Yui's arm went through his, gripping him gently. She smiled at him again. "Let's go," she said. Izuku swallowed, fighting the heat on his cheeks, and nodded. All right. They set off down the hill at a leisurely pace, Izuku feeling more and more sweaty and nervous by the second. He could feel Kodai's warmth, her closeness. If this was really meant to be an outing between friends, then she was making it really hard to focus. Then again, he couldn't say he disliked this more playful, forward side of her. He wondered if anyone else besides him got to see it. Yui turned and looked at him somewhat blankly as they walked. "Where are we going?" she asked. Izuku balked at that. "Well, A small smirk danced on her full lips. It was then that he remembered she'd been the one to invite him in the first place, not the other way around. "Hey," he exclaimed. "Shouldn't you be the one who knows that?" He couldn't help but smile. Izuku didn't know it, but when he smiled and laughed a little, his eyes had a jade twinkle. It was enough to nearly make Yui swoon. She kept her composure, though, and said, "I know. I just thought, maybe you'd have something you'd like to do." "Well, my idea of a fun outing is to, Izuku coughed, "go to a comic shop or a hero merch shop, so I'm sort of in your hands, as it were." "I like comic shops," she said quietly. Izuku looked further down the street. Musutafu had quite a few shops and unique stores near Yue, though one could not necessarily call it a full shopping district. It was more on its way to becoming one. Still, though, why don't we browse some shops, then? Izuku suggested. I bet everything will be really cheap now, with Christmas behind us and all." "I'm not sure I want to buy anything," Kodai said. Well, we can always do something, Al." "No," she interrupted. "That sounds fun. Sorry, I would like to just browse." Okay, then." They kept walking. Izuku was still in a cold sweat over their physical contact, but now he was nervous about their communication as well. "It's still hard for us to understand one another immediately. Why am I not better at understanding what she's saying?" "Oh, I always have to jump to frantic conclusions and look weird." Meanwhile, inside Yui's head, why am I not better at conveying my thoughts? He's gonna get the wrong idea and think I'm a cold bitch. And then, at the same time, wanna keep trying. Either from the strength of their feelings or just the sunken cost fallacy. They both knew they'd gotten too far into it to give up now. They turned a corner, leaving the high street that led up to Yui and down a side street. Izuku pointed at a shaded shopfront with dark windows. 2 small cherry trees, bare in the winter, drooped in front of it. That's he coughed. A cat cafe. Yui looked up. Her blue eyes shimmered a little. She said. I like cats. Izuku had no real opinion on cats one way or another. But I'm gonna have to get some new hobbies and interests, and I'm gonna have to get them fast. Besides, a cat cafe sounded interesting enough. Let's go, then. The two of them walked into the cafe. A little bell dinged to announce their arrival. It was a narrow corridor, which somewhat took Izuku aback. It had looked spacious from the outside. Was it not connected to the dark shop windows after all? To the right was a coffee bar, which had a young woman sitting at it in an apron. Hello there, she said brightly. You two make a cute pair. Izuku and Yui both flushed red and looked in opposite directions, but they didn't separate their arms. They were both thinking, that's probably not what she wants to hear. The employee giggled a little. Is this your first time at a cat cafe? Well, you pay here and get a cup of coffee and a pastry each, along with 30 minutes inside the room with the cats. She nodded to a door opposite the bar. Izuku realized that must lead to the room that had the storefront window. The door had a small window on it at head level. Yui gently slid away from Izuku and walked gracefully over to it. He found his eyes trending downward. Her strides look nice in those tights. Snap out of it. She put her neutral face close to the glass. Why is it set up this way? She asked quietly. The employee seemed slightly put off by Kodai's manner, but answered anyway. You have to de-disinfect before and after leaving the room. For the cat's safety and yours. This isn't just a cafe, you see. It's also their home until they get adopted. A twinkle of excitement escaped Yui's blue eyes. You can adopt them. Yes, if you wish. You have to sign some papers, though. We can't bring a cat back to Yui, Izuku blurted. Yui did her usual enigmatic half-smirk, and poked him in the chest. I know that, silly. A goofy smile spread across his face. She never stops taking me off guard, huh? You're UA students? The employee asked. That's interesting. Heroes. Izuku nodded. Second year. Yui's eye twitched. Do you not recognize him? The woman paled. No, sorry. I don't watch the events that much. Izuku felt a little uncomfortable. For some reason, Yui seemed a little upset. We'll take half an hour, then, he told the woman, quickly remedying the situation. Okay. She took his debit card and swiped it. What would you like to eat and drink? Coffee and Danish, please, said Kodai flatly. For my pastry I'd like a croissant, I suppose. And, instead of coffee, could I have hot chocolate? Izuku asked. The woman smiled kindly at him. Sure, she said. A few minutes later, she had that ready for them. She handed Yui her things first, and then handed over Izuku's. Then, she walked over and opened the door for them. Please use the hand sanitizer on your right as you enter and leave, she said. I will be out here if you need anything else. Enjoy. She closed the door behind them. Izuku held Yui's things for her while she sanitized her hands. The girl had a slightly grumpy look on her face. Is something wrong? Izuku blurted. Yui's eyes widened. Did he just read my expression? She'd thought she'd been hiding it. No way he'd noticed. That hardly ever happened. She choked on the word. Sorry, she pouted. I just can't believe that woman works so close to Yui and doesn't recognize Deku at all. Izuku laughed. It's not a big deal, though. Besides, I'm often masked when I'm in the field. He took his turn with the hand sanitizer. Yui seemed to relax at that. Then she looked down at his hot chocolate, which she was holding, and smirked a little. Izuku turned back to take his things back and halted. Looked her in the eye. What? He asked. Hot chocolate, she asked playfully. Yeah, I don't really do coffee or caffeine in general. She blinked at him. You really just raw dog life like that? No enhancement at all. You, raw dog. What on earth is that supposed to mean? She shook her head, a disbelieving smile on her face. Izuku Midoriya. She conceded his hot chocolate and the paper-wrapped croissant, then turned to open the second door into the cat room. The sun was shining in through the storefront window into the room, casting a warm glow over it. There were all kinds of couches and chairs and nooks and crannies in the room, of various colors and soft materials. A huge cat tower loomed in the corner, and several string toys dangled off of it. They were the only humans in the room. But the cats they were everywhere. Lounging, sitting, walking around a bit. 3 sat on the windowsill and sunned themselves. 1 was taking a bath right at Izuku's feet, licking between its claws. Yui made a very feminine noise. It wasn't quite a squeal, but it was close enough. It was the same sound Izuku had heard his mom make when looking at his baby photos. He smiled again. It seems she makes me smile about once every 5 seconds. Why don't we sit down? He suggested, pointing to a nearby sofa. There was already a cat sleeping there on the leftmost cushion. Yui sat down next to it, and Izuku sat on the other side of her. Kodai stared down at the cat for a moment. It was curled up, with a black back and upper face, but a white lower face, belly, and legs. What's the word for that coloring again? Izuku asked. Tuxedo, she answered, still just staring at the feline. It stirred a moment and blinked its eyes up at them. They were blue, like Kodai's own. Why don't you pet it? Kodai leaned forward to the coffee table the sofa sat behind and picked up a binder off of it. She opened it and began flipping through. Izuku leaned over to look at what the binder was, curious. Their shoulders nudged together. Oh, I see. All the cats are listed here. Each page had a picture of a cat, their name, gender, age, and personality. A few had notes warning not to pet them in certain places, or not at all. Kodai found the tuxedo cat, which had the curious name of Capone. It was a 3-year-old male. Still an adolescent, Kodai muttered. There was no warning against petting Capone, though, so she set the book down and began stroking his back. The cat responded by immediately beginning to purr and rolling over on his belly. Yui giggled and began scratching gently at his white underfur. The cat closed its eyes, content. Izuku watched her watch the animal, not realizing how goofily in love he appeared. You're very careful, he commented. I would never have thought to look at that binder to make sure. I mean, I probably would get scratched and hissed at immediately. Well, Yui said, we can't all have a reckless streak a mile long. I meant careful as a compliment. She relaxed her eyebrows and smiled. I know. Suddenly, another cat, a tabby, jumped up into Izuku's lap. He leaned back and gasped, surprised. Yui brought her head around. The cat was circling his lap, purring and nudging his chest. Then, it plopped itself right down. You're in my spot, thought Yui Kodai. Oh dear, where did that come from? Kodai, why is your face red? Izuku asked naively. Nothing, she said shortly and leaned forward to check the binder to hide her embarrassment. She flipped to the tabby's page. She's called Lily. Oh, a girl. Izuku looked down at the now purring cat curled up in his lap. Is she okay to pet? Only on the back. She does not like people touching her belly, it says. Gingerly, Izuku stroked down the cat's striped spine. Lily responded by sinking herself deeper into him. The cat's warmth emanated off of it in waves. They sat in silence for a few minutes. It was peaceful enough for a little while, with the cats to occupy them, but Izuku slowly felt more and more awkward. Small talk. I need a conversation topic. Did you own pets, Kodai? He asked. Or do you own? She replied in confirmation. There is a parrot at my home. But, I guess it's not your parrot. It didn't sound like it from how she described it. Must get better at interpreting her statements. Yui nodded. I suppose it belongs to my mother. Her mom. Suddenly, Izuku remembered the night of the movie when he'd taken her to her bed, and the sleepy things she'd told him. Your mother she must be an interesting person. To own a parrot. Kodai gave him a bemused expression. Is it interesting? Well, I think it is. He replied defensively. Maybe. A pause. What about your mother? Kodai asked. That took Izuku aback. Kodai hardly ever seemed to ask him questions, especially about his personal life. But this is an outing between just the two of us, so of course she'll try to make conversation. I shouldn't think of her as only being the quiet girl. Still, was it possible she wanted to deflect the conversation to him and not talk about her mom? What about her? He responded. Is she? Interesting. Inwardly, Yui cringed to herself. How awkward can I get? Izuku only answered honestly, though. I think she is. She's raised me by herself for most of my life, so. Oh, Yui's mouth shut. It's fine. He quickly added. My dad he's working overseas, so I haven't seen him very much But it's not a big deal or anything. Her lips curled into a smirk. I suppose All Might is more like your dad. No, have you been talking to Todoroki? No, Yui blinked. What? It's just he had this theory one time. Never mind, it doesn't matter. Izuku rubbed his forehead and sighed. All Might is a big role model to me and yes, a mentor as well, but he's not my dad or anything. Our quirks are just similar. And how long do I want to keep going with that lie? If I want to be in a relationship with her. So if you only have a parrot have you always just liked cats? He asked. Yui looked lovingly down at the tuxedo cat, Capone, who had just moved into her lap. My friend Seiya had a cat. I see. Seiya. Must be a friend from elementary or middle school. He was a black cat. And big. Yui bit her lip. Izuku blinked at her patiently. He really wanted her to talk. To just open up. But he didn't know what he could do to ease that process, besides just being present. He was worried that if he said anything, he'd just mess it up. One time, Kodai said in a very small voice. I tried to use my quirk on him. On the cat. Oh, Izuku's eyes widened. But your quirk doesn't work on living things. We were only 6. The doctor had only advised me not to try it. Izuku nodded in understanding. At that age, Kodai would have still been testing out her quirk, and the doctors may not have been able to capture the full scope of it yet. Kodai, he said, somewhat slowly. Your quirk doesn't work on living things, right? She shook her head. But, I didn't know that, you see. And, Seiya saw me do it. So, did she get mad at you for trying? Yui nodded. Accused me of trying to shrink and steal her cat. What happened after that? I told her I was going to make him bigger, so she had nothing to worry about. Izuku snorted, still stroking Lily's back. Nothing to worry about. You would have accidentally unleashed a panther. Kodai laughed. Izuku lowered his hand from the cat, stunned. She was laughing fully, continuously. It was like music. And it was infectious. It spread to him. In seconds, they were both laughing. Ahihaha. Hehihaha. Yui rubbed her eyes and sighed, coming down from the amused high. Not only had it been ages since she'd been able to laugh like that in front of someone, it had been ages since she'd been able to look back on a memory with Seiya so fondly, let alone one that involved the girl getting mad at her. It's all because of you, Izuku. All because of you. They both died down to chuckles, and then silence again. The cats continued to purr. Izuku returned to petting Lily. Yui returned to petting Capone. Near the window, 2 orange cats played with a ping-pong ball attached to a string. Izuku blinked, very slowly. Warm. It was then that it occurred to him ... he had not felt so at peace in ... how long had it been? Months. Years. His whole life. Izuku Midoriya and Yui Kodai both looked at each other at the same time. He gasped a little, his lips parting. Emerald eyes met sapphire. I'm going to drown in her eyes, he thought. If they are pools, then they don't have a bottom. I'll sink and sink and sink until I... Without realizing it, he'd shrunk the space between their faces to inches, centimeters, millimeters. Yui closed her eyes and kissed him. A zillion alarm bells went off in his head at once. Her lips, against his. Happening. Right now. Forget it all. Suppress it all. The moment. Izuku shut his eyes and shut his thoughts. He returned the kiss. Her lips were soft. They moved slightly against his. Her slender hand caressed his neck and slid down the front of his chest. She smelled vaguely of lavender. His head spun. He felt like he was ascending to heaven. They separated slowly. As Yui pulled away from him, she dragged his bottom lip with hers. Just a little. Izuku stared back into her eyes again, breathless. He wasn't sure what to do or say. Completely lost. Broken. She'd broken him. Well, she commented. That cat's out of the bag. Izuku looked down at Capone and Lily, their temporary furry companions. Nice choice of words, he squeaked. Another moment of silence, and then they were giggling again. Well, yes, yeah. For the next 20 minutes, they sat in silence, petting the cats, both smiling widely to themselves, unable to look the other in the eye. When they left, Yui put her arm through his again. Izuku coughed and scratched his chin as they went back outside onto the street. Would you like to, keep going? All right, Kodai breathed. Lead the way. Midoriya-kun.